Hey family, welcome back to my video. Today we will see, what if Harry Potter manipulated and trusted Voldemort? Before we start, I would like to extend my sincere thanks to the original author of this story for granting us permission to use it in our YouTube video. Your generosity is greatly appreciated. The author's creation and the original stories link in the descriptions. Please do check that first. Now enjoy the video. Gain. Harry ducked. Something soft hit his face. The basilisk had swept the sorting hat into Harry's arms. Harry seized it. It was all he had left, his only chance. He rammed it onto his head and threw himself flat onto the floor as the basilisk's tail swung over him again. Help me, Harry thought, his eyes screwed tight under the hat. Please help me. There was no answering voice. Instead, the hat contracted, as though an invisible hand was squeezing it very tightly. Something very hard and heavy thudded onto the top of Harry's head, almost knocking him out. Stars winking in front of his eyes, he grabbed the top of the hat to pull it off. And felt something long and hard beneath it. A gleaming silver sword had appeared inside the hat, its handle glittering with rubies. The size of eggs. Kill the boy. Leave the bird. The boy is behind you. Sniff. Smell him. Harry was on his feet, ready. The basilisk's head was falling, its body coiling around, hitting pillars as it twisted to face him. He could see the vast, bloody eye sockets, see the mouth stretching wide, wide enough to swallow him whole, lined with fangs long as his sword, thin, glittering, venomous. It lunged blindly, and using his skills honed by being a seeker, Harry dodged to the side and it hit the chamber wall. It lunged again, and its forked tongue lashed Harry's side. He raised the sword in both his hands. I have to do something. I have a bloody sword. The basilisk lunged again, and in a moment of below-average intelligence, Harry threw his whole weight behind the sword and drove it to the hilt into the roof of the serpent's mouth. Take that, you dusty-ass overgrown tapeworm. However, as Harry was mid-thought, he felt warm blood start to dribble his arm, followed by him feeling a searing pain just above his elbow. A quick glance allowed Harry to see that one long, poisonous fang was sinking deeper and deeper into his arm, and it splintered as the basilisk keeled over sideways and fell, twitching, to the floor. Harry slid down the wall. He gripped the fang that was spreading poison through his body and wrenched it out of his arm. But he knew it was too late. White-hot pain was spreading slowly and steadily from the wound. Even as he dropped the fang and watched his own blood soaking his robes, his vision went foggy. The chamber was dissolving in a whirl of dull color. I absolutely fucking hate this shithole of a school. A patch of scarlet swam past, and Harry heard a soft clatter of claws beside him. Fox, said Harry sarcastically, happy to have a witness to his death. You were fantastic, Fox. He felt the bird lay its beautiful head on the spot where the serpent's fang had pierced him. He could also hear the echoing footsteps, and then a dark shadow moved in front of him. You're dead, Harry Potter, said Riddle's voice above him. Dead. Even Dumbledore's bird knows it. Do you see what he's doing, Potter? He's crying. Harry blinked. His vision was almost completely gone, but he could barely make out Fox's head slid in and out of focus. Thick, pearly tears were trickling down the glossy feathers. Something phoenix tears heal things, to quote Hermione. I'm going to sit here and watch you die, Harry Potter. Take your time. I'm in no hurry. Harry felt drowsy. Everything around him seemed to be spinning, but he also knew that he would be fine as long as Tom Riddle made no real move against him. So ends the famous Harry Potter, said Riddle's distant voice. Alone in the Chamber of Secrets, forsaken by his friends, defeated at last by the Dark Lord he so unwisely challenged. Is that how you died? Alone? Asked Harry with the best Snape impersonation that he could. If his words had any impact on Tom, the teenager didn't show it. You'll be back with your dear mudblood mother soon, Harry. She bought you 12 years of borrowed time, but Lord Voldemort got you in the end, as you knew he must. If this is dying, thought Harry, it's not so bad, could do without the commentary track in the back, but assholes got a arsehole. Even the pain was leaving him, which meant that his stalling had worked. He was certain of it because instead of going black, the chamber seemed to be coming back into focus. Harry gave his head a little shake, and there was Fox, still resting his head on Harry's arm. A pearly patch of tears was shining all around the wound, except that there was no wound. The only sign of the once upon a Time stabbing of the fang through his arm was the thin little white scar. "Get away, bird," said Riddle's voice suddenly. "Get away from him," I said, "get away." Harry raised his head. Riddle was pointing Harry's wand at Fox. There was a bang like a gun, and Fox took flight again in a whirl of gold and scarlet. "Phoenix tears," said Riddle quietly, staring at Harry's arm. "Of course, healing powers, I forgot." He looked into Harry's face. "But it makes no difference. In fact, I prefer it this way. Just you and me, Harry Potter, you and me." He raised the wand. Then, in a rush of wings, Fox had soared back overhead, and something fell into Harry's lap, the diary. For a split second, both Harry and Riddle, wand still raised, stared at it. Then, without thinking, without considering, as though he had meant to do it all along, Harry seized the basilisk fang on the floor next to him and plunged it straight into the heart of the book. There was a long, dreadful, piercing scream. Ink spurted out of the diary in torrents, streaming over Harry's hands, flooding the floor. "You fool!" screamed Riddle. "They're going to do to you what they did to me." Harry looked at Riddle with a frown. "You think I wanted to go back to the orphanage?" asked Riddle as his form shivered. "No," realized Harry. "I begged Dumbledore to let me stay here, to not send me back," said Riddle softly, caught up in the memory of rejection, "but he never listened to me. I was always forced to go back to the Muggles who abused me." Harry felt his stomach tighten upon hearing that line. "What do you mean?" questioned Harry. "Dumbledore is never going to tell you the truth. He's always going to tell you some vague answer and send you back there," said Riddle as his form dropped to the ground in pain. "Never trust him." "Why not?" questioned Harry. Riddle opened his mouth and black ink leaked from the corners instead of blood. "Because even though I am from before Lord Voldemort's time, I can still feel my own magic inside the castle. The potion's master, Severus Snape, he bears the mark of my magic on him very soul." "Snape was your follower?" Harry half asked, half realized. Riddle dropped to the ground, his body landing on all fours. Despite whatever pain he was going through, he still managed to nod. Riddle was writhing and twisting, screaming and flailing, and then he was gone. The words sat heavy on Harry's mind, that he was barely paying attention as Ginny awoke. Ron managed to clear out enough rocks to rejoin them. Lockhart, who was mentally an infant, also joined then. It honestly felt like he blinked and he was sitting in Dumbledore's office. Dumbledore crossed to one of the chairs by the fire. "Sit down, Harry," he said, and Harry sat, feeling unaccountably nervous. "First of all, Harry, I want to thank you," said Dumbledore, eyes twinkling again. "You must have shown me real loyalty down in the chamber. Nothing but that could have called Fox to you. But why should I be loyal to you? Are you actually trying to help me, or are you just as Tom Riddle warned me of?" He stroked the phoenix, which had fluttered down onto his knee. Harry forced an awkward grin as Dumbledore watched him. "And so you met Tom Riddle," said Dumbledore thoughtfully. "I imagine he was most interested in you." This had been true. Tom had been interested in him. Or rather, the myth, the boy who lived version of him. But this was also Harry's chance to ask some questions about what was said down there. "Professor Dumbledore," Riddle said, "I'm like him." "Strange likenesses," he said. "Did he, now?" said Dumbledore, looking thoughtfully at Harry from under his thick silver eyebrows. "And what do you think, Harry?" "I don't think I am," said Harry. "I hope I'm nothing like him." But he fell silent, a lurking doubt resurfacing in his mind. Was Tom Riddle really correct? Did Dumbledore care about him? "Professor," he started again after a moment. "The Sorting Hat told me that I'd have done well in Slytherin. Everyone thought I was Slytherin's heir for a while, because I can speak Parseltongue." "You can speak Parseltongue, Harry," said Dumbledore calmly, "because Lord Voldemort, who is the last remaining descendant of Salazar Slytherin, can speak Parseltongue. Unless I'm much mistaken, he transferred some of his own powers to you the night he gave you that scar. Not something he intended to do, I'm sure. Voldemort put a bit of himself in me," Harry said as his mind raced. Parseltongue was a bloodline ability from what he remembered from the research. His years at primary when he was young had taught him that things like genetics could only be passed from family member to family member. "He's lying to me, right to my face. Tom Riddle might be my family, and he would rather make up a story about transferring power than tell me the truth." Harry did his best to hide the horror he felt at realizing that he could not in fact trust this man across from him. The most powerful magical, political, and knowledgeable man in the wizarding world was not to be trusted. Also the anger he felt at being lied to so openly, but someone he had felt that he could trust. "Is it true that you didn't let Tom stay here over the summers? He said you always told him no and forced him to return to the Muggle world?" questioned Harry. "He told you that?" mused Dumbledore with a soft twitch of his lips. He was quick to hide the frown that had threatened to appear on his face. "Harry, it would have been unfair to Tom not to return him every year." "Why?" asked Harry. This time Dumbledore could not hide the frown from his face, because it was for the greater good of everyone. Tom came from the orphanage, he belonged there. "Even if they abused him?" asked Harry. Dumbledore winced. "There is more to the story, Harry. One day you will understand that I do everything for a reason. I sent Tom back because it was the best option available at the time, even if they abused him," repeated Harry. "Again, my dear child, one day you will understand that certain things need to be done for the greater good," replied Dumbledore. "And what if I was the one being abused?" asked Harry. "You're not," said Dumbledore sternly. "What do you call being physically hit, starved, forced to live in a cupboard?" asked Harry. This question Dumbledore did not answer, causing every ounce of goodwill between the two of them to slowly crumble with each passing second of silence. "Do you have any other questions, Harry?" asked Dumbledore. "Tom said that Snape was a follower of his, that his very soul was stained with his magic," said Harry. Dumbledore flinched as he visibly paled and seemed to age far beyond even his ancient age, but he let out a sigh. People are allowed to make mistakes. Snape made his fair share in his youth. But when he realized that his mistakes could put people in danger, he deflected and assisted us in helping overthrow Voldemort, replied Dumbledore. "How do you mistakenly join a bad guy?" asked Harry. "Arrogance, pain, heartbreak," answered Dumbledore. "Can I ask you what was the mistake that made him turn into a good guy?" asked Harry. Dumbledore looked annoyed at the seemingly never-ending questions, but answered nevertheless. He provided information that he thought was harmless but got someone he cared about killed. Harry felt Dumbledore settle on his scar and he felt his blood freeze. "It was my mum. The long-nosed greasy hair-barmy tosser got my mum killed. He probably got both my parents killed. He got my parents killed and has the nerve to treat me like shite." Harry was so angry inside, he missed the slight glow that his eyes took on before he stood up and left, ignoring Dumbledore asking for him to return to the room. Tom was right. I can't trust a single adult in the entire bloody castle. Like I mentioned at the top of the chapter, this is going to be a shorter chapter because this is simply the first chapter and we will dive deeper into Harry's distrust of Dumbledore and others starting next chapter as he entered the third year where Al-Wasi believed that there was a lot of reasons to not trust any of the adults. I would appreciate if you joined my Discord using invite code KHFKCSFC. That's all I got you today. Until next time. Chapter 2 Hello. This is going to be simple and to the point. I am going to be rewriting a lot of the history and inner working of the wizarding world. This is a massive O, a term that I haven't seen used in many years. So, if you see something and think, WTF, do not worry, onto the story. Harry looked as his friends left with their parents as he waited for the Dursleys to arrive and get him. As much as he thought that he couldn't trust Dumbledore, was still scared of the elderly wizard. You do not get to be that old and still in charge if you weren't some kind of dangerous. Which kind of led him to the biggest question of his life so far. How do I escape from under his thumb? Harry frowned as he didn't have any single idea as to how he could do that. Dumbledore had forced Tom Riddle to go back to abusive muggles. How was he going to escape? You can. You're trapped. The sly voice that sounded a lot like Tom Riddle whispered in the back of his head and Harry felt goosebumps cover his body as he shivered, because he knew the voice was right. At least for now, Harry didn't expect to be able to overthrow Dumbledore at 12. Realistically, it would be closer to 15 than anything else, as Harry wasn't expecting to take some massive leap forward over the summer as he turned 13. He fully expected to work his ass off from the moment he returned to Hogwarts to the second that he would be forced to leave once more. But even just 1 year of hard work would not be enough, not enough to deal with a man with a literal century of experience under his belt. Would another year of extremely dedicated be enough? That remained to be seen as Harry was worried about Dumbledore, but there was also the chance that he would never have to openly challenge the older man. He was old, like really old, maybe Dumbledore would do him a massive favor and just fight like the old bastard that he was. The first thing that he had to do was figure a way out from the Dursleys. That would be the most difficult part. How far did Dumbledore's reach go? Snape had been a Death Eater, a follower of the Blood Purist organization created to follow Lord Voldemort based on what Harry had heard in passing. But the man with greasy black hair was still walking around freely, being an absolute arsehole to students without consequence. How was that possible? Even if Dumbledore could keep him from going to prison, surely some parent or another had complained about the awful manner that Snape treated each and every student not in his house. Maybe there's something that Harry could do about that. However, all of those thoughts came to an end as he saw his large uncle waddling towards him. His large face was a shade of pale that Harry had never seen before. His small eyes looked to be a shade or two darker than normal, and Harry was worried that something had happened to his uncle. "Boy, we need to get home immediately," hissed his uncle, and Harry nodded instantly. His family was never overly abusive. His aunt was more likely to take the belt to his backside than his uncle. However, that did not mean that his uncle was not quick to hit him with a SWFT backhand or swat. His uncle was also much stricter and less likely to feed him if things didn't go as he wanted. Harry reached for his trunk, but his uncle grabbed it for him and they walked back to his uncle's car where his trunk was put into the boot of the car, and Harry slipped into the backseat and watched as his uncle pulled out into the heavy London traffic. "Is everything okay?" Harry couldn't help but ask as he watched his uncle sit there in silence and not even complain about the bumper-to-bumper traffic for the last dozen or so minutes where they had barely inched forward. "I dunno," admitted his uncle quietly. Harry frowned. That was never good sign. Did Dumbledore get to him so soon? "Did someone from my school pay you a visit or something, elderly man with a long silvery beard?" asked Harry. His uncle flinched at the description, and Harry felt his heart start to pound as he realized that Dumbledore had indeed paid his uncle a visit sometime between the incident at the Chamber of Secrets and the end-of-term ride home. There had to be a way to make sure that his uncle didn't take him home, and also a way that his uncle would drop him off at his preferred location of Diagon Alley. But what could it be? How could he get his uncle to do what he wanted without magic? His uncle was scared of magic, so in theory threatening him would work. But Harry couldn't perform magic outside of the grounds of Hogwarts. He's a filthy muggle. What else would motivate him but his dirty greed? Tom's silvery words hissed in the back of his mind, and Harry found himself nodding. Not at the racism but at the honest words. His uncle was many things. Greedy and money-hungry were some of them. Rather high on the list, but still below fat and regular hungry. Using this knowledge, Harry reached into his pockets with both hands and felt several of the golden coins, galleon, inside of his right pocket almost immediately. Fishing around, Harry felt his hand close around a grand total of 7 of the golden coins. Each one of the coins weighed roughly a full pound once they were outside of the bag that Gringotts provides, as Harry learned that the hard way. And while Harry was a little naive about how much gold cost at the moment, he imagined that it was a lot based on how his uncle lost his kind when his aunt lost her gold wedding band in the garden last summer. "You know, I don't know what they told you, but I would be more than okay spending the summer elsewhere," said Harry. His uncle flinched again and whispered, "I was told not to let you out of my sight." Harry nodded and fished out a single galleon from his pocket, the large gold coin shining in the afternoon sunlight. "What is that?" asked his uncle as he glanced up through his rearview mirror, his eyes glancing back and forth between the road and his nephew in the backseat. "It is a solid gold coin that my kind use as currency," replied Harry, feeling the calmness of his words shaking with each second that passed. "Solid gold?" questioned Uncle. "Yes, solid pure gold," answered Harry. "Gold is up to 384 pounds per ounce," muttered Uncle as he liked his lips at the thought of getting nearly 6,100 pounds for the single coin before he shook his head. "Nice try, but they said not to let you out of our sight." Harry pulled out a second coin and he heard his uncle groan as if he threw up in his mouth, but he didn't stop there. Pulling out a third coin, Harry said, "3 coins if you drop me off where you usually leave me to pick up my school supplies." Uncle looked like he was physically in pain but ultimately nodded, flipping to put on his blinker to pull off to make a right and make a turn back into the heart of London. "What are you going to do this summer?" asked Uncle. "Do you really want to know? Wouldn't it be better if you didn't know so you can honestly say that you don't know?" said Harry, echoing the sly words that Tom was whispering in his ear. His uncle nodded, and within 15 minutes, Harry exchanged 3 gold coins for his freedom this summer, releasing Hedwig to go hunting as he dragged his luggage into the leaky cauldron, greeted by Tom. "Little early on the school shopping, lad," joked Tom as he saw Harry dragging his trunk and stop at the bar. "I had some things I wanted to look for before I returned home," lied Harry. "Smart lad, this is one of the least busy times of the years," complimented Tom. "I reckon all you will run into is the young interns here for the summer." "Who?" asked Harry. "Oh, I guess you wouldn't know," said Tom. "The alley has so many businesses that are only available to masters of their crafts. The only way to get ahead and qualified for the job after you've taken your owls is to spend the summer here in the alley working for that business. Enchanters and curse breakers will spend their time at Gringotts, potion apprentices will be at the shop, healers at the clinic near the end of the alley." Harry soaked in every word of Tom's explanation, curious as to why nobody at Hogwarts had ever mentioned this in the last 2 years. "You should get going. The stories like to be all shut down by 8 p.m., said Tom as he helped Harry open up the path to the alley. Harry thanked the elderly barkeep and dragged his trunk through the mostly empty streets of Diagon Alley. His eyes bounced around as he saw teenager after teenager, all dressed in rather formal robes, walking about the street. It made sense given what he had just learned, but it also made him question how he had never seen this type of thing before. He made his way to the bank with the intention of making a withdrawal, when he ran directly into a man who had merged from one of the side streets and apparently had also been making his way to the bank. Harry was sent crashing to the ground while the older boy barely moved from the impact of Harry's light body colliding with his own. "Oh shite, you okay?" said the man as he reached his hand out to help Harry up. "My name is William, but people mostly call me Bill." Harry looked up and frowned as he saw the oldest of the Weasley children in front of him. William, or Bill, looked almost exactly as Ron had always described him. Bill was rather tall, noticeably slender but not too thin, handsome face with soft features with an almost elfish boy charm about him. And of course, he had red hair like the rest of the Weasley family. He wore it long and in a ponytail, and he had an earring with a fang dangling from it. He wore a set of Gringotts robes and what seemed like boots of dragon hide. What were the chances that the eldest Weasley child would quite literally run into him during his visit to the bank? How many people were even in London, and how many of them had a family that was seemingly very close to Dumbledore? Harry was not very trusting of the adult Weasleys at the moment. He had too many questions about the first time that he meet them. Mama Weasley already had multiple children out of Hogwarts and she had gone to the school herself. Why was she questioning where the barrier was? Surely Ginny had seen her brothers off before, so why? Harry doubted that she was a Dumbledore spy. Her family was much too loose-lipped for an important task like that. But perhaps she had been told to look out for a scrawny, thin, black-haired boy and help him cross over into the magical world. Offer a guiding hand to a muggle-raised boy, and that made sense. She hadn't been looking for him when they arrived, nor had her kids known who he was. Harry took the hand and allowed Bill to help him to his feet, dusting himself off after making his way back to his feet. "You seem a little long for an internship," noted Billy. "I happen to just be short," retorted Harry before he could help himself. Bill raised his hands and chuckled. "Okay, fair enough." Harry felt a bubble of panic build in his stomach. "I am going to continue to make my way to Gringotts if you don't mind." Bill raised an eyebrow. "Are you from Liverpool? They said we had a prodigy coming, would explain your youth." He rubbed his chin. "You into curse breaking or enchanting?" Harry felt the panic in his stomach explode and send a burning sensation all throughout his body, the lava melting his inside, and he couldn't breathe. Harry was unsure of how his face looked in the moment, but whatever it looked like made Bill wince and say, "Ouch," undecided. "Huh?" Harry nodded without speaking, unable to trust his voice to work properly in the moment as he felt the lava pool in his stomach, the heat growing worse by the second. "Don't worry about it," assured Bill. "They are both rather simple when you get into the studying of them." Bill lifted Harry's trunk into the air with a flick of his wand. "Walk with me, kid." Harry just nodded and followed the eldest Weasley. "So curse breaking has more to do with power than finesse," admitted Bill. "Think of it as if I push you in one direction. Curse breaking is finding out how much force I am using to push you in that direction and create an equal force in the opposite direction. This allows the cruise to be halted, which gives you the ability to repurpose the magic that was used to make curse or spell." Harry hung on to every word as they walked towards the bank. But as spells linger and stay attached to an object, they grow stronger as you give them time to absorb passive magic from the environment, continued Bill, which is why I say it is a power game. You need to be incredibly powerful and in control of your magic to break a curse properly. Oftentimes, you start off by judging the magic with a soft push. Then as you feed more and more magic into the push, you start to realize how much more magic the curse has. That's why we usually have a team, because when you go to a place like the tombs of Egypt, the pyramids are covered in runes designed to absorb magic to fuel those spells and have been doing so for nearly 3,000 years. Harry felt a massive amount of respect for Bill as he spotted the junior cursebreaker name tag pinned to the left breast of Bill's robes. "How many people are on your team?" asked Harry. "We hit a lot of smaller pyramids and tomb sites, so we generally go about 10 to 12 deep," answered Bill. "The buildup of magic by the runes is not always an insane amount, but you don't want to get stuck in a battle against 3,000 years of absorbed magic by yourself. Usually we work in groups of 3 at a time, bringing in more people as needed." Harry found the entire thing much more interesting than he believed that he would have, because it seemed like this was the type of job that allowed one to flex their magic might. While he was not the most powerful wizard in the world, his ability to cast just about every spell from every branch of magic they had learned so far was allowing him to think he was above average. "Enchanting is the opposite," said Harry, making a large leap in the opposite direction, hoping that he was right. "Yes and no," said Bill. "They don't teach advanced enchanting like they used to when I was in school, so you might have a more basic understanding of how enchanting works." Harry frowned. "What did they teach you?" Bill scratched the top of his head. "Forgive me if this is slightly rough around the edges, but it's been almost 8 years since I learned this." Harry just shrugged. "Think of enchanting not as the opposite of curse breaking, but as the cousin of it. Curse breaking is about finding the strength of something and matching it to neutralize it. But enchanting is about finding the correct strength of magic to create a desired effect. You're molding all these threads of magic into one another, crafting a tapestry of intent and magic. That when you finally pull it all together, it creates what you picture the effect to be. It could be something like making shoes that grow with a child's feet or a hairbrush that only lets you pick it up. Usually, you create the enchantment and bind it to an object with runes. That's why to be a curse breaker or an enchanter, you need at least an E in ancient runes on your owls. You need to be able to identify runes and their purpose, as they're the basis for both curse breaking and enchanting." "Oh," said Harry, absorbing the new information from Bill. Bill took the word to mean something else, whistling in admiration. "You got an O on your owl for runes? You might be something special after all." Harry gave him a small smile. "Thank you for walking me to the bank and explaining everything to me." "Ah, it was nothing," said Bill, waving off the "thank you," as they arrived in front of the bank and he floated Harry's trunk back down to the ground. "It was fun to have someone listen to my job with real interest. In fact, you kind of remind me of my younger brother, Percy. He is a bit of a bookworm, but I love the brat." Harry grabbed the end of his trunk and Bill said, "I guess this is where we part ways. I gotta go get my new assignment for Egypt. My family won some kind of prize and is going to spend the summer out there with me. Sadly, I wouldn't be around while you're here for the summer. I leave tonight." "Nice," commented Harry honestly. "Anyway, nice to meet you," started Bill, but trailed off as he realized he never got Harry's name. But before he could ask, he was cut off by a sharp voice saying, "Mr. Weasley, humans might take their time in being late, but we believe in being on time." They both turned and saw a tiny goblin in a nice set of robes standing there, tapping his foot impatiently. Bill rushed over to the goblin and the pair of them walked away from Harry, whispering to one another. Harry watched as the pair of men always away before making his way over to the teller, his eyes looking for a name tag, but the mean-looking goblin did not seem to be wearing one. Sitting on his high stool, back straight, and head held high, the goblin started at him with a look that could only be described as a combination of curiosity and confusion. "Mr. Potter," greeted the goblin teller, "do pray tell, why a rather young man such as yourself is standing before me in the bank not even a full day past school term?" It was a rather good question, but one that had a rather simple answer. "I'm here for money," replied Harry honestly, seeing no reason to lie to the being who would hopefully be helping him make this withdrawal as soon as humanly or goblinly possible. The goblin blinked as if he said the sky was orange and the sun was a giant grape, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to say something to Harry. "Hey, how did you know who I am?" asked Harry after a moment of silence. "You're pulling on me, aren't you?" chuckled the goblin. "Huh?" replied Harry. "Mr. Potter, what do you know of the last great wizarding world?" asked the goblin. "Less than I should," admitted Harry. "Before the last dark wizarding lord died trying to kill you, he amassed an army of wizarding followers," started the goblin, "but you see, it was not just wizards that followed him, but also magical beings such as giants, werewolves, and vampires. But not goblins. No, we were never even given the chance to join him. We were hunted, picked apart piece by piece. It started overseas in Germany and slowly made its way west to the UK." A young goblin yawned as he polished the doorknob for the last time, before reaching up to lock the deadbolt to the small bank. Cochem, Germany was a small peaceful town. The small population of 5,000 was almost entirely magical, and that allowed them to be free and helpful. Just moments ago, the last of the wizarding kind had left less than 10 minutes ago. There was a ripple of magic that washed over the building. The sensation left the goblin feeling like he was a fish trapped in net. The magic was heavy, thick, and angry as it continued to push down all around the goblin. There was no point in pushing against it. It was way beyond anything that the young goblin would be capable of countering. He ran away from the door into the back, where the eldest goblin of their small bank ushered them into a goblin magic ceiling vault. The last thing that he heard before the vault door closed was the sound of the door being blasted off the hinges. The vault shook and the wards that made up the vault rippled time and time again, but the trio of young goblins in the vault kept huddled up together. There was a flash of blistering heat that wrapped around the vault, and they could see the runes that powered the wards glow brightly as they struggled to absorb the powerful magic being cast at the vault. Eventually the world went still and they could feel the magic on the outside world slowly start to fade away, but they were too scared to exit the vault. After hours, they finally opened the vault with a pulse of magic from inside the vault and found the ruins of their bank around the vault. Blood was smeared all along the ruined walls and floors. A silvery skeleton mask was on the ground in front of them, the head of a pale dark-haired man next to. A quick scan of the surroundings showed that there was nearly a dozen bodies on the ground, all of them wearing the same black robes. But sitting near where the entrance to the door had been, was the head of the eldest goblin for the bank on a spike. Looking out beyond the ruins of their once beautiful bank, they saw the still smoking remains of Cochem, the city covered in flames. The smell of burning flesh and bile filled the air, clinging to the thick clouds of smoke. But it was only when they looked up into the evening sky that they understood what had happened over the last day that they had been hiding inside the vault. There had been rumblings of a British madman who had been slowly growing in power. How this could happen under the watch of Albus Dumbledore was beyond anyone, but most of the wizarding communities around the world had scoffed at the thought of any single person being a threat. The slaughtered town of 5,000 people and the burning ruins of the town was proof that the man was not playing. He had killed nearly 5,000 wizards and witches in less than a day. And the proof was the large dark mark that hung over the mass graveyard that was now Cochem. Harry's eyes were wide at hearing the goblin before him recount the story of how terrible the Dark Lord had been. Thousands of witches and wizards killed in a matter of hours. It was inhumane to think about, and yet, Harry found himself believing that it was true. "The reason that I, along with almost every other goblin alive, knows who you are, is because you are not just the savior of the wizarding kind, you're the savior of the magical world," finished the goblin. Harry suddenly felt a lot more pressure on his very being than he had ever felt before, and he was unsure of how he could ever live up to the expectations of the entire magic community of the world. "Why are you really here, Mr. Potter?" asked the goblin. "I want to pull out money to be able to spend the summer here in the alley," answered Harry. The goblin tapped on his chin before he wrote something on the magic parchment in front of him, and Harry was surprised to see that the parchment wrote back just as the Tom Riddle diary had. "The parchment that we have up here is connected to the inventory of the bank through a series of runes, wards, and enchantments. It would take you decades to even get close to being able to replicate it," commented the goblin as he noticed Harry staring at the parchment. Harry nodded as he understood that it was going to be one of those things that he wouldn't be able to understand until he was much older and wiser. Like why some woman looked at men and just giggled. "Ah, you will not be needing to pull out any cash today, Mr. Potter," said the goblin after a minute of writing lines and reading responses. Really, why not? Asked Harry. Because your godfather owns a flat here down at the other end of the alley, said the goblin before he scribbled down something on a different piece of parchment and barked out an order in his native tongue. Godfather? I have a godfather? Asked Harry. Most magical children, it is who is supposed to raise you in the event of your parents' death, replied the goblin. Who is my godfather? Asked Harry. My dear child, I can provide you the history lesson, but it is not my business to educate you on the inner workings of your family tree, teased the goblin. Just know that he and his family are as wealthy as your father had been, and you could never spend all of that money even if you tried. Harry blinked at this news. His godfather had been or was rich. His dad had been rich back when he was alive. He had so many questions, but he also got the feeling that the kindness that the goblin had been showing up would dry up, and he did not want that to occur. Thank you for all of your help, said Harry. I never got your name. The goblin grinned, showing off all those sharp teeth that seemingly filled his mouth. You never asked. I have forgotten my manners, admitted Harry. My name is Ordlish, child, said the goblin after a moment. You've been extremely helpful. Is there anything that I can do to help you out? Asked Harry. You want more information about your family? Said Ordlish with a sly smile on his face, the kind of smile that would have been at home on Tom Riddle's face back in the chamber. As a normal teller, I cannot tell you anything specific about your family. If you make me your family account manager, I would be able to give you more information. The offer felt icky, like he was talking to one of those demons that Uncle and Aunt were also going on about when they came back from their Sunday services from the local mass hall from time to time. But at the same time, it felt like a high reward, high risk gamble. You need to fish for more information. How do I know that you're telling the truth? Asked Harry as he followed the advice of Tom Riddle. The goblin smiled even bigger, his face twisting in a manner that feels like it wasn't meant to, and Harry was reminded that a single one of these beings had killed nearly a dozen armed wizard. You are quite the smart little wizard, chuckled Ordlish, his voice filled with respect even as he hissed the words. You are not what I expected, Mr. Potter, but worry not. Once I work for you, I am bound by magic to service you and your family. Can I get that in writing? Asked Harry, simply repeating what he heard his uncle had once said to a man who worked in the bank. Ordlish nodded, pulling out a new piece of glowing parchment and a knife covered in runes. It is simple. Goblins respect power, gold, and blood, child. You wish to make a deal with me, you have to bind it in blood, said Ordlish. Same time, suggested Harry. Ordlish nodded without flinching, slashed his palm before handing the knife to Harry, who carefully did the same. The blade must have been covered in some really good runes, as the blade cut into the skin without causing pain. Ordlish grasped Harry's bleeding hand with his own bleeding hand, their blood mixed before Ordlish guided both of their hands onto the parchment. I, Ordlish the Bold, am pledging myself to House Potter. I plan to help his gold grow, his land expand, and his fortunes turned. Positive, said Ordlish, and the parchment glowed green as it accepted his oath. I, Harry James Potter, the boy who lived, accept this oath of pledge on the condition that Ordlish never lies to me, said Harry as the parchment glowed green once more, his words guided by the magic of the ritual. I agree to these terms, said Ordlish, and the parchment glowed golden before sent a chain of magic into both of them. The wound on both of their hands healed, and Harry looked as fresh skin that covered where the gash had been. Magic was beyond wonderful and powerful. He needed to learn more about it. Ordlish grabbed their contract parchment and sent it off flying to be filed with a burst of magic. Moments later, the same goblin who had been sent away with the scrap parchment returned with a key, presenting it to Ordlish, who in turn gave it to Harry. This is the key to the Blackthorn flat in the Magi apartments down the alleyway, said Ordlish. So, does this mean that you can tell me who my godfather is? Asked Harry. Ordlish wrote on his special parchment only to frown heavily upon reading the response, his eyes scanning the words on the parchment. I cannot access the will of your parents. It is where the named godfather would be, said Ordlish. The will was sealed. Sealed by who? Asked Harry. Do you know who? Yes, by the Minister of Magic Fudge and Albus Dumbledore, answered Ordlish. Dumbledore filed the paperwork himself. Harry felt his inside freeze and he struggled to breathe once more. It seemed that every part of his life always circled back around to Dumbledore in some way, shape, or form. The rest of their meeting passed with Harry being all that mentally present as Harry struggled to think of anything other than Dumbledore smirking as he pulled the strings on his life. He exited the bank, dragging his trunk once more, and he made the 15-minute walk back through the alley until he passed all of the shops and started seeing apartment building. Stopping at 816 Isle of Unnard, Harry saw a blonde girl standing there outside the building, her skin more tanned than any girl Harry could remember seeing in London. She wore a solid dark gray robe, her blonde hair tied in a French braid that flowed down her back. She wore a beret on her head. She was beautiful and Harry couldn't help feeling drawn towards her, but he resisted the urges as he knew that would be unwise to approach a girl like that just out of the blue. She noticed him as he got closer to the apartment building, but walking towards the doors rather than her, she shot him a friendly smile. But that was when Harry saw it, the moving mugshot of a man screaming in silent anger, or was it agony? The words were big and bold: Sirius Black, Azkaban escapee. Wanted for helping the Dark Lord kill the Potters. The girl spoke in a French accent, showing that she was not from England after all. I hope he does not come here, we do not need to deal with that crazy mess of a man. Harry couldn't help but agree with this girl. The girl gave him a once-over. The name is Fleur Delacour, Gringotts' enchanting apprentice. Huh? Said Harry as he had been busy looking at the wanted poster rather than paying attention to the rather pretty girl beside him. I gave you my name, so that when you go upstairs and wank off to the image of me, you know what name to shout to the heavens, you dirty little boy, said Fleur with a huff as she walked into the building, leaving behind a red-faced blushing Harry Potter who was at a complete loss for words. A.N. So once again, this is an AU, meaning that I will be using my own world building and explanations and backstories. If you like it, cool. If you don't, I have terrible news for you. I've added internships and teenage jobs, because I had a job when I was in HS like most Americans. There will be no bashing in this story. Harry doesn't hate anyone at this particular moment, even if I personally dislike Snape. Think more scared than angry. Harry is scared that Dumbledore is just playing with him. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a review as I really try to reply to all of those. You can also send me a PM as I try to reply to all of those. Or if you want to be really cool, you could join my Discord with this invite code, VJEWMHKD. Until next time. Chapter 3: Who the Actual Fuck Was or Is Sirius Black? It had been a trio of days since Harry learned the name, yet there was seemingly nothing about the man that he could find. Everything was kept all hush-hush and articles about his trial were nowhere to be found. It was as if they simply threw the man in prison and locked away the key. His parents' will had been sealed and the man who was responsible for it was thrown in prison, never to be seen from again. Or so they had wished, because Sirius Black had escaped their unescapable prison and was roaming the country freely. Was there anyone in this entire country who knew what they were doing? Dumbledore couldn't keep the supposedly safest place in the world safe, and now people were breaking out of the unescapable prison on the minister's watch? As far as Harry was concerned, it meant that things like usual were far out of his control and would come back around to probably bite him in the ass. But that was future Harry's problem. Current Harry had a lot of money and a lot of free time to enjoy. Another thing that Harry didn't account for was not having to do his homework under the blankets by flashlight anymore. With his newfound freedom, he could sit in the bright sunshine outside Florian Fortescue's ice cream parlor, finishing all his essays with occasional help from Florian Fortescue himself, who, apart from knowing a great deal about medieval witch burnings, gave Harry free Sundays every half an hour. It was there that he spotted the beautiful blonde-tanned teenage girl again, where he waved her over. She looked surprised to see him sitting there eating ice cream, but nevertheless walked over to him. "Fleur, right?" asked Harry with a hint of timidness. He knew how angry women could get if you got their name wrong. "Yes," replied Fleur. "I don't know your name." "My name is Harry," provided Harry. "Do you want to take a seat?" Fleur looked at the seat that was across from Harry that he gestured to, his homework in front of him, but the tome of advanced runes made her slightly more interested in the boy, however tiny the amount. Fleur slid across from Harry as he waved his hand, and all of the parchment from his homework rolled itself up, stopping in front of Harry, allowing him to grab the rolls and put them away in his book bag for safekeeping. All that remained on the table was his tome of runes and the notes that he was taking from the book. Fleur smirked at Harry, her magic reaching out to feel the soft hum of magic from the runes that covered each roll of parchment. That's a cute party trick. You chain together a self-rolling rune with a motion sensor rune, then a positioning rune. All three of them are tied to your magical signature to boot, a solid quad rune array, analyzed Fleur. Harry smiled brightly at her, a lopsided display of teeth and genuine joy from the young boy across from her that made her smile in return. Yeah, you're good at this, noted Harry. I've been trying to get into some of the more advanced stuff. I see that, commented Fleur as she pointed at the book, 10,000 Runes from the Ancient World by A.N. Longbottom. This book is a bit boring, but I am learning a lot. I want to try to make something of my own soon, admitted Harry. Like what? Asked Fleur, humoring Harry. Well, I've read about how they made time turners, but I wanted to look into something that would help predict the future, said Harry. You would need a lot of magic to power the runes. Probability or something that change all the time. You wouldn't be able to factor in the choices that other people would make either. It's not to say that it's impossible, but the runes you would need to write would be nearly impossible without a team of masters, countered Fleur. What about using Arthur's theory of magical variation with Merlin's principles of magic? Asked Harry. Fleur shook her head. Arthur's theory only applies to magical variation in your own actions based on the condition of your body and magic, nothing more and nothing less. It is a personal application only. Merlin's principles of magic could work, letting magic guide the intent and decisions of the world, but again Arthur's theory would keep it from expanding past what you know and understand. You know a lot about this, given it some thought? Questioned Harry. Fleur nodded and said, yup, with a popping sound on the end of her P. You'll find that most OWL students look into this kind of thing, but ultimately without an array that could absorb information from everyone in the world, it's a dead end, continued Fleur. I guess I am ahead of the curve then, frowned Harry as he closed the book in front of him, glad to get it out of the way now rather than in 2 years. Fleur hummed in appreciation as she grew curious how a fourth year was this advanced in runes, while Harry was wondering whether impressed that he was only a third year or that he was this far along. You need to refine the concept of runes, muttered Fleur. Magic is so heavily influenced by intent. The broader and less details in your intent, the worse the magic will work. That's why accidental magic when you're a kid is so powerful. The intent and emotion behind the magic is some of the purest forms of spell casting. Noted, said Harry as he pulled out his small personal notebook and scribbled down intent before closing the book and slipping it into his book bag once more. You have a very solid foundation here, Harry. Between school and parents you should be able to polish off this and create some truly great rune arrays in the future, said Fleur as she finished reviewing all of Harry's notes on runes. I haven't got any parents, mumbled Harry, but Fleur heard him all the same, her chest tightening at those words. Well, then I must say that your professors are truly amazing to get you this advanced in such a short period of time, said Fleur. Oh, I haven't gotten around to taking that class yet. I will be starting this year, said Harry with a blushing face and a sloppy smile. Then by all means, you're really smart then, Harry, admitted Fleur. Once you get some guidance in the subject, you might be stealing jobs from us at Gringotts. I think that is something I want to do, said Harry. I haven't really given all that much thought on what I want to do after finishing school. This would be a good time for that, said Fleur as she stood up. I got to go, Harry, but I'll see you around. Harry watched her leave. What a nice girl. The fluttering of wings caught his ears and Harry looked up to see an unfamiliar brown owl circling around him. The owl landed and presented its leg, allowing Harry to take the letter from it before flying off. The long looping handwriting was very similar to the handwriting that had been on the note of his invisibility cloak, to Harry Potter. Harry opened it and found a short letter. While I hope that this letter finds you great health, my boy, I must say that I am disappointed. Based on our last conversation, I was led to believe that you would do as you were told. Yet here we are during the summer break with you not at your relative's house. I have the best intentions for you, Harry. I know what is best for you, Harry. I need you to listen to things that I tell you to do. It is not safe for you to venture outside of the house. You are to return home immediately upon reading this letter. If I have to come and get you, I will be most displeased. When you return to Hogwarts, we will have to discuss this type of behavior and how it will not be tolerated in the future. Sincerely, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. Harry read the letter once, twice, and then a third time. He was confused. Professor Dumbledore was not his legal guardian, or was he? Who was he to tell him what to do? Harry shoved the letter into his backpack, slinging it over his shoulders, before grabbing his tome and notes in his arms and walking back to the apartment. Before Harry could get inside the building, he felt a hand on his shoulder. Harry looked up at the owner of the hand on his shoulder and felt a bucketful of ice churn inside of his stomach. He had walked right into Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic himself. Harry recognized him from the newspapers that he saw in the alley. Fudge steered Harry through the apartment building, stopping at the door of the apartment owned by his godfather before tapping his wand, opening the door. "Sit down, Harry," said Fudge, indicating a chair by the fire. Harry sat down, feeling goosebumps rising up his arms despite the glow of the fire. Fudge took off his pinstriped cloak and tossed it aside, then hitched up the trousers of his bottle green suit and sat down opposite Harry. "I am Cornelius Fudge, Harry, the Minister of Magic." Harry already knew this, of course. He had seen Fudge once before, but as he had been wearing his father's invisibility cloak at the time, Fudge wasn't to know that. "I recognize you from the newspapers," said Harry before he softly added, "Sir." Fudge smiled as he waved his wand to summon a tray of tea and crumpets on a small table between the two of them. "Well, Harry," said Fudge, pouring out tea, "you've had us all in a right flap. I don't mind telling you. Running away from your aunt and uncle's house like that. I'd started to think, but you're safe, and that's what matters." Fudge buttered himself a crumpet and pushed the plate toward Harry. "I was unaware my summer location was a government matter. Surely you have more important things to worry about than a 12-year-old, questioned Harry. Fudge smiled at Harry over the rim of his teacup, rather like an uncle surveying a favorite nephew. Harry, who couldn't believe his ears, opened his mouth to speak, couldn't think of anything to say, and closed it again. "Who is more important than the boy who lived?" said Fudge. "I won't deny that there are always going to be more pressing matters around the office. But to the public at large, there is nothing more important than making sure that you are safe and sound. Plus Dumbledore reached out to me and told me that you had run away from home." Harry felt his stomach boil with fear and took a sip of tea, trying to drown the flames of anger and fear inside. "I always stay at Hogwarts for the Christmas and Easter holidays," he said, "and I don't ever want to go back to Privet Drive." Now, I'm sure you'll feel differently once you've calmed down," said Fudge in a worried tone. "They're your family, after all, and I'm sure you are fond of each other, very deep down." "They hate me," muttered Harry without thinking. "Excuse me," hissed Fudge, the polite uncle-like behavior fading away almost instantly as his sharp ears had managed to pick up on Harry's softly spoken words. "Repeat yourself at once." "My family isn't very fond of me," whispered Harry. "They hate everything to do with magic, including me." Fudge's eyes narrowed and his face turned emotionless as he took several deep breaths as Fudge seemed to be trying to regain control of his emotions. After a moment, Fudge smiled at Harry, this time much more softly than before. This was a real smile, not the politician version he had seen earlier. "That is something I will look into," said Fudge, now buttering himself a second crumpet, "but what I want to do is enjoy your time here." Upon seeing Harry's surprised face, Fudge continued to say, "You're going to spend the last of your vacation here in the alley. I will station an additional squad of Aurors here to patrol, but you can remain here until it's time for school." "Hang on," blurted Harry. "What about what Dumbledore said?" Fudge blinked. "Dumbledore? He sent me this letter," said Harry as he produced the letter and handed it to Fudge. Fudge read it and crumpled it before blasting it with a small burst of flames from the tip of his wand. "Do not worry, my dear child. Dumbledore cannot tell you what to do while you are on your summer vacation. He is your headmaster. It's time he remembers that is his only title." Harry nodded with a small bubble of excitement in his chest, a small flutter of hope building inside of him. "What of my parents' will?" asked Harry. "Oh yes, that," said Fudge, the man shifting in his seat uncomfortably. "It was sealed during the war because we had bigger things to worry about. We had to rebuild most of the wizarding world." "Can we unseal it?" asked Harry. "I honestly don't see why not," admitted Fudge. "I will send in the paperwork, and it should take a couple days. Even the Minister of Magic still has to deal with administrative process." Harry forced a laugh when Fudge laughed at his own joke. Fudge polished off his snack before checking his watch and gasping. "I must be going, Harry," said Fudge as he stood up. "One last thing. I don't want you wandering off into Muggle London. All right. Keep to Diagon Alley." and you're to be back here before dark each night. Sure, you'll understand. My Aurors will be keeping an eye on you for me. Okay, said Harry slowly, but why? Don't want to lose you again, do we? Said Fudge with a hearty laugh. No, no, best we know where you are, I mean. Fudge cleared his throat loudly and picked up his pinstriped cloak. Well, I'll be off, plenty to do, you know. Have you had any luck with Black yet? Harry asked. Fudge's finger slipped on the silver fastenings of his cloak. What's that? Oh, you've heard. Well, no, not yet, but it's only a matter of time. The Azkaban guards have never yet failed, and they are angrier than I've ever seen them. And with that, Harry was alone in the apartment as Fudge walked out the door. The man seemed a little fearful as he left. Sirius Black must have been one extremely dangerous man. And if that was the case, then Harry needed to be better prepared for the man. But how was the real question? Harry knew that he learned best by actually practicing magic, as his last 2 years at Hogwarts had shown him. His understanding of magic and magical theory had always been solid, but his ability to actually cast spells had always been his better half. And as much as he wished that he could just start practicing spells, he also knew that the Ministry of Magic had the ability to track his casting of spells, and that was the last thing he wanted to get in trouble for. How exactly do they do that? Harry would spend the next couple of days taking a deep dive into that, trying and failing to understand how the Ministry was able to tell that underage witches and wizards were casting magic. He was sitting on the bench outside the apartments when a large black dog came sprinting by with something in its mouth. Harry looked at the dog as it dropped the thing in its mouth with a soft plop. Harry stood up and looked at the item, finding a book titled Magically Suppressed: A History of the Ministry's Power Grab Over Our Lives by Bathilda Bagshot. Harry looked around for something maybe chasing the dog that had clearly ran off with this book, but he found nobody coming after it. So, he just picked up the book and held it in his hands, skimming the table of contents for anything that would give him some idea of what the book contained. The book was a lot about history of the Ministry and its impact on the magical world, but it was a little less boring than the crap that Ben put them through in his class. Harry was near the end of the book when he found what he was looking for. The trace is a charm which allowed the Ministry to know of magic cast in the vicinity of wizards and witches who were under 17 years of age. When any magical activity was performed in the vicinity of the underage individual, the runes inscribed all throughout the handle of the wand are tracked by the charm and reported to the Improper Use of Magic Office within the Ministry of Magic. The Ministry will always be alerted to the spell that was used and to the location of the caster and the time it was cast. The charm and runes allow the Ministry to track underage magic, which was banned under the decree for the reasonable restriction of underage sorcery. The trace automatically broke upon a wizard or witch's 17th birthday, as the young witch or wizard's magic power the runes on the wand. Harry frowned as he looked at his wand. The trace was something that he would probably not be broken until he was 17 years, almost 4 years and a couple months away, so maybe there was nothing that he could do. "You look overly lost in thought," said a teasing familiar voice, drawing Harry's attention as he looked up from his found book to see Fleur looking at him. "I am," admitted Harry. "About what?" asked Fleur. "I want to practice magic over the summer, but I can't because of the trace, unfortunately," said Harry. "Ah, the trace is something I would love study. It is a rather unique set of runes," said Fleur as she glanced down to Harry's wand. "Do you want me to see if I can break yours?" Harry's eyes bounced between his wand and Fleur, struggling to find an answer in his mind. This was his wand. "How can I trust you?" asked Harry, his voice coming out soft and scared. "I can make a magical vow to you," said Fleur. Harry looked at Fleur, his green eyes meeting her blue ones, and he felt a warmth fill his body, his magic racing like a river as he maintained eye contact. "Break my wand and magic wouldn't save you," whispered Harry, and Fleur nodded as she felt her entire body get wrapped in ice and the threat hung over her like an anchor in one of those Muggle cartoons. "I want it back by the end of the day." Harry extended his wand to her as she nodded her understanding, and Harry watched her walk away before making his way back to his apartment. He was slightly distracted, so he missed that the door was already unlocked. But he did not miss the large black dog sitting on the couch in the living room, nor the fact that it morphed into a dirty man. "Sirius Black," whispered Harry. The man nodded and he stood up, Harry's eyes trained on the wand in his right hand. It was pointed downwards, but Harry was still on edge as he watched the man approach him before pulling him into a tight hug. "Harry," whispered Sirius near Harry's ear as he planted a kiss on top of Harry's unruly hair, his left hand softly rubbing up and down Harry's back. "I am so sorry for not being there before, but I escaped as soon as I could. I noticed the new wards over the apartment and figured you must have been here." "Oh," said Harry as Sirius released the hug and took a step back, "I'm confused. You look just like James did when he was your age, except for the eyes." "That's all, Lily," noted Sirius. "What's going on here?" asked Harry, his confusion continuing. "I'm your godfather," said Sirius with a confused look on his face. Himself now, surely Dumbledore would have told you. He oversaw the ceremony himself and was even the witness for the will signing declaring it for the entire world. Harry felt his chest fill with burning shards of ice. "Dumbledore?" "Yeah, the old wanker. Where is he?" asked Sirius as he looked around. "He's supposed to help me capture the man who helped you know who killed your parents." Harry shivered before he collapsed, his ears hearing Sirius scream his name as he blacked out from overload of the information that Sirius was providing him. With Fleur. Putting Harry's wand into the magical scanner was on the funniest moments of her life. Wands were not something wizards or witches parted with freely, let alone something that they let people run experiments on. The results of said scanning was a 22-page list of runes and enchantments on the wand. Her eyes were wide with excitement. This was very much different from the simple heating enchantments placed on objects that owners put to prevent people from stealing their property. This was layers upon layers on magic weaved together. Fleur had let her eyes scan the pages, failing to understand the first 10 pages that made the wand work like a wand. She was able to put that together as she noticed that there was line after line that symbolized the channeling of power, but she couldn't make out more than that. The runes were probably coded or tied to a family bloodline so that this exact thing couldn't happen to allow their secrets to be revealed to an outsider. After that, she was able to easily pick apart the remaining runes, and what she found was simpler than she had thought. The first set of runes were a personalized age line, keyed to the owner of the wand's magic specifically to track them until they came of age. The answer was so simply that Fleur almost wanted to slap herself in the face. The ward was tied to the wand and the registered owner of the wand that was made official at the purchasing of the wand. By linking the wand and magic of the owner of the wand, they were able to create a second set of runes that was used to identify the length, core, and owner of the wand. Fleur had been to the ministry. This was why they scanned the wands upon entering the building. This set of runes allowed them to do so, allowing them to have record who and what wand entered the government building. It was what came after those basic runes that made Fleur pause. Her magic was soft and fine, like a single thread of fabric that was pushed through the eye of a sewing needle. It was meant to be used to feel out other people's magic as well as allow her to weave her magic through other sets of magic. It was what allowed her to be so good at runes and enchanting. Her magic was like a needle in the haystack, effortlessly sliding into the rougher, broader magic of others. She had felt this magical signature before. It was one that she felt when she had chosen to apply for her working papers to do this internship here in England. He had been there with the minister who had spoken with her own headmaster to get the approval. She would never forget meeting someone that famous before. Albus Dumbledore had a very strange magical signature. It was cold and angry like the icy wind in winter blizzard. It also felt old, like it was much older than the man himself, like as old as death itself. His magical signature did not match the personality of the old great wizard, but Fleur had chalked it up to the wand of the wizard. He was over 100 years old and had fought in a world war as well as England's own civil war. He might have caused his fair amount of death in his defense of the light side. Nevertheless, his magic was something that Fleur would be able to recognize no matter where she felt it. It was so different from anyone else that she had ever felt in her lifetime. So, imagine her surprise when she felt it wrapped inside Harry's wand and upon looking at the runes, found out why she felt the magic of the old headmaster in Harry's wand. The old man was using his magic and runes to create a written list of every spell that Harry cast with his wand. The headmaster was clearly spying on Harry, who obviously didn't know it. Looking further into the runes of Harry's wand allowed Fleur to notice that Harry's trace ward had been altered by Dumbledore. Instead of just triggering the ward in areas where clearly there should be no magic, such as his summer housing with his Muggle family, the ward had been made to activate basically everywhere but his time at Hogwarts, as there was a location-based set of runes added to the trace ward. Fleur whistled as she couldn't lie. Despite being a creepy stalker of a headmaster, the old man knew exactly what he was doing with his runes being layered almost perfectly not to be noticeable affecting the performance of Harry. The keep word was almost. The runes that Dumbledore added were originally crafted by the bearded wizard and thus bared his magical signature. However, since the old man wasn't able to just take Harry's wand from him and recharge the wards with his own magic every couple of weeks, that led Fleur to the last rune. This rune placed directly onto the bottom of the wand, the circular round end of the handle, the part of the wand that faced the owner of the wand when the wand tip was pointed at anything away from the owner. This rune was put there to drain Harry of his magic every time he placed his hand on his wand. The drain on Harry wasn't some massive life-changing drain, but Harry had been using about 85% of his entire magical strength. Every spell, every counter-curse, every time Harry raised his wand in defense of his life, which from what Fleur had learned was fairly often, Harry had been unable to give it his 100%. And it was through no fault of his own, but rather the efforts of his weird headmaster. Fleur had lost all respect for the supposedly great bearded wizard. With all of the knowledge on what was put on the wand, Fleur got to work. She started scripting runes together to create the opposite effect for each of Dumbledore's placed runes as well as the personalized trace ward on Harry's wand. She worked through her lunch period and despite one 15-minute break to do her actual job. And break the ruins on a music box, she continued to plot out her masterpiece. It was nearing the end of her workday when she finished. The runes that she had created to fix Harry's wand had taken up a lot of her available runes paper. She could ignore that for the moment, as she placed Harry's wand in the middle of the runes before she channeled her magic into her carved work and watched as it glowed a bright green before her magic crackled through the runes and she was forced to close her eyes as the light grew too bright to keep her eyes open. As the green light disappeared, she ran the wand through the scanner once more just to get the 10 pages that made the wand work like a wand again. Fleur smiled brightly as she had cracked a code that would not be easily figured out by just anyone. Dumbledore, for all his inexcusable behavior, was still nothing short of being a genius who was generally unmatched by anyone. What did I just uncover? Thought Fleur as she packed up all of her belongings and headed home. The story progresses and anyone who says different is obviously just a conspiracy theorist. This is not a bashing fanfic, this is more of a vote of no confidence fanfic where Harry is very untrusting, because he's already been exposed to things that make him feel like he can't trust certain individuals such as Dumbledore or Snape. But that doesn't mean he doesn't trust anybody, right? Obviously you still have Ron and Hermione and you're gonna have Sirius Black and you're gonna have Fleur in the mix as well. I am trying to write something quality-based rather than fast or short because I could pump out 2K chapter just about every day, but that's now how chunks of the story are meant to be told. Also, Harry is still very young in this story, he's closing in on 13, but Fleur thinks he's already 14 because her school takes the owls at 16 not 15 like Hogwarts. I want you to keep in mind this because when POVs change, Fleur is much smarter, skilled, and able than Harry. Harry is not naive, but he's still new to this and you'll see his thinking evolve and grow as he does. Lastly, please join my amazing Discord with invite code 2WN5ERFD. I am planning a Christmas giveaway of shorts and would love to have you guys in there to be potentially selected. Until next time. High_Mars out Chapter 4A. N. Hello to all. I know some of you people probably skip these notes to start the story, but I am giving away a PS5, Xbox Series X, or $200 for this Valentine's Day. February 14, 2024. I do giveaways for my Discord community every 3 months and you could win. For Christmas, I gave away Hogwarts Legacy for PC is requested. Join my Discord with invite code C6MDX5DX. Now onto the story. Snape was very much in a good mood, why would he not? Potter had gone home for the summer, and Dumbledore had allowed him to venture out to collect some of the rarer potions ingredients. Of course, there was his favorite part of the summer breaks, the lack of children. This is why he was taken aback when a blonde young woman came sprinting out of the bank in Diagon Alley and slammed into him, sending his body crashing to the ground. He rolled over to land on his right hip, protecting the shrunken vials containing the ingredients that he had come to the alley to retrieve from breaking. Sorry, mister, spat the girl over her shoulder. Her breathy words spoken in heavily accented English were nearly lost to his ears, but years of teaching had given him super hearing and his ears picked it up all the same. She had in her haste dropped a package on the ground. Snape rose to his feet and drew his wand, flicking it to summon the box. His magic washed over the box, and he searched for anything abnormal about the package. There was nothing that concerned him, no hidden dark intent or spikes of malicious magic flowing from the box. With practiced ease, Snape's magic folded carefully as he maintained the spell holding the box up but also changed the spell to open the box as well. Inside was a pale wand. A pulse of strong magic was coming off it in waves. The owner of the wand was clearly a rather powerful wizard, yet the magic felt wild and less refined than an adult's would. Perhaps the girl was some kind of mage in training or just had really potent magic that she was affiliated with. It was not uncommon for witches and wizards of a certain tier of strength to have their magic take on an imprint of their best skill. For Dumbledore, that was transfiguration, and for the Dark Lord, that had been the dark arts. This meant that spells of their best skill had more control with less magic wasted to power the spell. I was what had made them so formidable in a battle. It was why nobody dared to challenge either of them in an open battle. It was why the Dark Lord had managed to wrestle absolute power over his followers. Nobody had dared openly question Voldemort and nobody had been able to betray him without suffering. Even Snape's betrayal had not been total. He had straddled the fence, a man with two masters and loyal to none. The pressure of having two people that he had to answer to, two people who demanded nothing but the absolute truth from him, allowed Snape to develop his control over magic to an extent that he had never thought possible for himself. One such ability was the ability to trace magic. It came in handy more than anyone would be able to count. Dumbledore and the Dark Lord both had this presence about them during their peaks that felt like a tsunami was threatening to consume them just by existing. It was as if there was a fine thread connected to the wand that was slowly pulling it back towards the owner of the wand. And it was all Snape could do to simply follow the gentle tug, the man growing more curious as the wand grew hotter by the second, heating with a desire to be reconnected with its owner. Snape was led through the alley, various former students moving out of his way. The summer interns were something that Snape, himself, had loved greatly before the war broke out and everything went to absolute shite. It had been a much more simpler time. She had been there at his side, teasing him for his dedication to studying potions as her red hair that she could not tame, even with magic. They had been there as well, their leader alive and full of himself. Snape was not certain how the encounter really played out for him. It was none of his business. But he knew that he had zero chance of survival on that day. She did though. Snape had personally asked him to spare her and he knows that he would have spared her. She was just too stubborn to get out of the way. That is how Hagrid had found her, standing directly in front of her child's crib, the baby crying out for parents who would never hear the screams despite being close. I am going to burn in hell for all of eternity for what I've done. I just hope that I get to drag some of these bastards with me. Snape stopped as he arrived at an apartment building, but he didn't get to enter before the same foreign girl who had previously run into or rather over him, exited the building. She let out a blur of quickly spoken French as she snatched the wand from his magical grasp and walked back into the building. Snape could feel the muscles in his right eyebrow spasm as he was once again reminded of the fact that seemingly dominated his life over the most recent years. I fucking hate children. And with that, Snape whirled around, causing his cloak to flutter in the created breeze as he had seen to the return of the wand and was done with whatever side quest this might have been. He was not here to deal with foreign French young ladies. He was here for a higher purpose, potion ingredients. I've got to get out more if that is really what is passing through my mind. Severus, you might not be better than this. But you can at least try to be better than this. His thoughts were full of self-questioning as he marched back through the alley and towards the entrance of Nocturne Alley where he would be able to get his hands on some of the less legal stuff, with Dumbledore. He was not in the best mood as he started at the runes showing the massive decay in the wards that protect Harry's family home. Dumbledore did not care all that much for Harry's Muggle family. They were simply a means to an end. That end being the relative safety of Harry himself. Dumbledore was not unaware of the general lack of quality living that Harry suffered living there, but he also made sure that it never crossed a line. Harry didn't need to live a life of luxury, just as he didn't need to be abused and broken. A normal stern life was perfectly fine to Dumbledore, even if he was uncertain about how much of their behavior was to be tolerated. It was why he had spoken with Vernon before he picked Harry up from the train station. He had been rather hands-off, but if Harry's end-of-the-year outburst had been anything to go by, Dumbledore needed to make sure that Harry was being better taken care of. Speaking of the end of the year, the young man's mention of Tom Riddle had brought up rather strong feelings from his past. Tom Riddle had opened the Chamber of Secrets during his 6th year, however before then, Tom had been the perfect student. Honestly Tom, you should know you need to put more effort into your schoolwork, teased a much younger Dumbledore as he held back a 15-year-old Tom Riddle. What do you mean, Professor? I got the spell right on my first try, questioned Tom. Yes, after 10 minutes of looking bored in the back of the classroom, you attempted the spell and got a passable attempt, Mr. Riddle, admitted Dumbledore, but there is more to magic than simply casting a spell and getting a desired result. Is there? Challenged Tom. Yes. One day you will leave this castle and have to venture out into the real world, Tom. And if you are not careful, the world will dismiss you, warned Albus, his blue eyes locked onto Tom's guarded face. I don't want to leave Hogwarts, said Tom. My boy, you are already nearing the end of your 5th year. You have barely 2 years left here before you have to embrace the next chapter of your life. Surely there has to be a way that I could stay here? Asked Tom. Faculty can remain in the school, but students may not, Tom, said Dumbledore. There is no way that a student could get a pass. Is there anything that I can do to avoid going back to the Muggle ward over the summer? Asked Tom. You are a year too young for your internship, Tom, started Dumbledore. I'm afraid that you will have to go back to the orphanage. I thought that you cared about me, challenged Tom. I do, but this is not up for discussion, said Albus sternly. Tom opened his mouth and Albus cut him off. You will go back or I will personally put you back there and you will not be welcomed back at Hogwarts. Then I shall become a teacher, pivoted Tom. You're meant for more than that, Tom. You are smart and charming, you could be minister. I don't want to. I am going to become headmaster next year, Tom. I do not see myself hiring a 16 or 17-year-old as a professor. Then I'll come back when I'm 20 then. I look forward to it, Tom. Tom turned to leave Albus' classroom and he glanced back over his shoulder once more at Dumbledore, his eyes hardening. You know, you don't have to pretend to care about me. I much rather you tell me that you don't care about me up front than to lie to my face. The door slammed behind him and Albus was left alone, his chest tightening as he saw Tom Riddle for the last time. The next time that he would see that young man, Lord Voldemort would be taking his place. Albus shivered as he finished his trip down memory lane. He would always regret his manner of dealing with Tom. It was among his biggest failures, one that he was eager never to repeat again. With Fleur, she felt panic when she realized that she had lost Harry's wand, but when could she have lost it? Before she could retrace her steps, the man who she had bumped into had found her and returned the wand to her. Fleur's magic washed over the wand, and she could feel the disgust flooding out from the magic in the wand as if the man who had held it with his magic was someone the magic in the wand didn't like. Magic is funny like that. It was not just some energy to be used to cast spells. It was its own living thing, something that pulsed with intent. It was why emotions were known to supercharge some spells while also rendering some spells completely useless in some instances. But Fleur's magic seemed to be well accepted by the wand. However, that made sense to her, because Fleur, in her own humble opinion, was everyone's type. Maybe it was the way that her magic flowed, maybe it was the way she was physically attractive, maybe it was a combination of both. She was universally liked, as the myths that Vila being so disliked were something out of bad storytelling from the past. Women liked her and her Vila sisters because it created a system where Vila women did not hurt their friends by accepting attention from the men that their friends liked. Men liked them because they were pretty, and their magic was so compatible with everyone else's. She walked up the stairs, making her way to Harry's apartment. Fleur knocked on the door and found herself greeted by an older man at the door. She found herself questioning who the man was. She had lived here for the entire summer so far, she could not remember seeing him. She pulled on the feel of the magic surrounding him and she found that he was tense and protective, as if he was afraid that she might pose a threat to Harry. She mentally paused as that honestly made a bunch of sense. Harry had to have a guardian. Because everyone had parents even if they were orphaned, someone had to take care of them up until they were of age. Was this man the person who was supposed to be looking after Harry? Who are you? Asked Fleur. You don't know who I am? Asked the man. She stopped to look over the man. He looked well-aged beyond that of a man in his 30s as the dad of Harry might have been. He had a gaunt, sunken face, waxy skin, yellow teeth, and long, matted hair. He looked like he had just gotten over being sick. He was terribly thin. He also looked vaguely familiar, and not because he looked like Harry, although she could see the British pureblood features in both of them. She was so uncertain of what to make of this man. Why was he here all of a sudden? "Harry is sleeping if you want to wait for him," offered the man. His ears twitched and Fleur could feel the nervous rush of magic come spirally out of him. "Okay. Thank you," said Fleur as he moved back from the door to allow her in. The room door was open down the hall and Fleur could see the glimpse of Harry wrapped up in a blanket sleeping soundly. "How do you know Harry?" asked the man as he led the way to the living room, the house being cleaner than she would have expected with two men living in the apartment. "I met him at the ice cream shop. I helped him with some runes research," admitted Fleur. "Well, actually I met him outside the apartment building and told him my name so that he could mutter it to himself when he wanked to the image of me later." Fleur blushed heavily as the man let out a laugh that seemed akin to a series of barks. The man coughed roughly as he struggled to breathe. "James would have loved that." I can imagine Harry's face turning red as James laughed at his little mini-me struggling to get a word out, said the man after he recovered. "James?" asked Fleur. The man's face grew sad for a second, but also more serious. James was Harry's father. He passed away years ago. Fleur winced. "Sorry to hear that. I should have figured." "No, you're fine," waved off the man, his eyes slipping down to the ground. "I wish I could forget that Harry grew up without his dad as well. I wish I could have done so many things better, been better myself." Fleur could feel the truth of his words in his magic, the energy coiling inside the man, biting into his core, as if trying to punish the man for something. But as pained as he seemed, she also could feel how honest he was with everything and how he wanted to be better. "You know, it's never too late to be better," said Fleur. "You'll find that it's never too late to make a change in life. My papa told me that." He smiled at Fleur, and the smile made him look younger than before, his once handsome features shining as he nodded his head. "Your father is a wise man." "I would tell him, but that compliment will go straight to his head," joked Fleur. "His ego is already big enough as is." The man chuckled. "My father was one of those types of guys too. He was so smart, savvy, and confident in all aspects of life. I miss him more and more with every day that passes." Fleur felt the regret in his magic flare once more. The man was different than most people. She allowed her magic to sift out of her body slowly, her Vila magic reaching out and slowly mixing with his. This could be used to cause him to be attracted to her. That is what most people think that her magic did. It was only part of what she could do. She could use it like a magnet and draw people to her. But she could also use it to calm people down, one of the reasons that Vila were able to become great healers. She was not expecting his magic to blast her magic back with a force that she had never encountered before, her shock evident on her face. "You will find that my magic and I are completely in tune, sweetie," said the man with a wolfish grin. "You are not the first Vila that I have come across in my travels, nor will you be the last. I want you to know that was not personal, but nobody enters my mind, and nobody messes with my magic." Fleur nodded. Some people were overly sensitive to their magic or mind being embraced by foreign magic. This man could have easily been one of them, but something told Fleur that there was more to the story. "So, tell me, what is Harry like?" asked the man. "You can ask me that question yourself," said the boy who was the topic of the question from the entryway to the room, his eyes taking in Fleur but still focused on the man. "Wiltshire, England." He sat at the head of the table, his eyes bouncing from member to member of the gathered guests in his manner. His eyes washed over the several empty spots, his brothers and sisters who were not free. Trapped like wild animals in that prison, tortured by the nasty foul soul-sucking beings. There used to be 15 of them, the 15 pillars of the inner circle, but there were only 9 of them gathered here today. "Why have you called us here today, Midas?" asked one of the 9. Midas was the owner of the manor, the codename given to him by the Dark Lord. It was a name of status and truth to his abilities. "Because Orion, there have been murmurs of our dear Lord drifting along the continent for the last couple of years," claimed Midas. "The Dark Lord lives?" questioned Spectre. "Yes," answered Midas. "If there is even a sliver of truth to the claim, then we must take action once more." "What of our brother Chiron? He is not here?" asked Ares. Midas frowned. "He has spent too much time with the enemy. His loyalty will have to be confirmed before we bring him into anything." Are we going to reclaim Castor, Pollux, and Flidae from Azkaban? Asked Dolos, his voice as silky as his name suggested. Perhaps. I've heard of someone recently escaping from the prison, said Prometheus. I believe that it was the cousin of your wife Midas. Midas nodded. Yes, we have 2 brothers and a sister left in that prison. We should be seeking to have them return to the family sooner than later. If my extended family's biggest fuck-up can escape, then we should be able to spring them from the prison. Ourselves. Lou nodded. I've heard whispers in the ministry that Loki lives. Midas's face twisted into one of deep surprise. Loki lives? Do tell? His father is not as sly as he thinks he is, said Lou, and Prometheus nodded in confirmation. He leaves his house elf to tend to the boy, while he keeps him under the Imperious curse all day. Loki managed to escape prison and now fights his father for control of his mind every single day. He is truly more powerful than we ever gave him credit for, commented Midas. Ares, you shall tail Crouch Sr. until he leads us to Loki and free him at once. Ares nodded. He will be liberated faster than you believe. Anku cut in. Do you wish for me to get rid of Senior along the way of Loki's liberation? It could do it for us? Midas stroked his chin, unsure of what would be the best course of option. We cannot have Crouch Sr. simply going missing. No, we shall stalk our prey for as long as we can before we move in and strike. If we capture Senior first, we can use his hair to potion into him and hide in plain sight. Anku nodded with a soft smile. We could have Loki pose as his father. Junior replaying Senior would be rather poetic, don't you think? Ares smirked as he agreed. Yeah, Loki would be one of the best men to take the place of his father? Midas hummed in consideration. We will make a proper decision on that front when we arrive at that fork in the road. But it would be a good test to give Chiron to see where his loyalty really lies after all these years. Striga yawned as he stretched out his large form. You mentioned the Dark Lord being alive. Where is the proof? Midas ignored the rude bluntness of his long-term friend. The proof is in the fact that Harry Potter has faced him when he was hanging off the back of the defense against the dark arts professor's head 2 years ago and fought his shade last year once more. Striga looked at Anseal, who nodded and said, so the rumors of the Chamber of Secrets being reopened once more were true. Yes, admitted Midas, believe it or not, but for once our spoiled sons were not being dramatic. I slipped an artifact into a young girl's belongings, an artifact that belonged to our Dark Lord. The mere sliver of power that the artifact possessed allowed for him to basically take over the school and out Dumbledore. Midas' words hung in the air. The power of the Dark Lord was not something anyone would forget. He was not regarded as the most powerful Dark Lord to ever exist because he was some random man. No, the fact that his artifact had brought Hogwarts to a halt was not that surprising to anyone in the room. No, the more surprising fact was that Harry Potter was still alive. How powerful was that boy? What were they teaching that boy? How much of a threat would he be at this moment to their plans? And if they didn't deal with him soon, how much of a threat would he become as he reached his magical maturity? Midas, you've met the boy right. What can you tell us of him? Asked Prometheus. He had just defeated a basilisk in battle with a sword, yet also had the wherewithal to hide a sock in a book and trick me into freeing my house elf, admitted Midas. Perhaps he is what the Dark Lord had assumed all those years ago, suggested Ares. And what is that? Asked Anku. Harry Potter may very well be more powerful than any other 12-year-old in the world. He may very well be a proper rival to the Dark Lord, answered Midas. Is that how he survived the Dark Lord all those years ago? Asked Spectre. It may very well be, suggested Lou, who knows what pure brutal magical might could accomplish in the right situation. Harry Potter might be as powerful as anyone who ever has existed, but he is not a match for the Dark Lord, hissed Orion. None of you are to forget the vow that we took when we became members of the Inner Circle. A hush fell over the room as all 9 members of the Inner Circle present were reminded what it took to get into the Inner Circle, what they had vowed upon joining. Complete faith in the Dark Lord's plan, strength, and devotion to his cause. Harry Potter is not the one who will bring down the Dark Lord, not today and not ever, said Midas. Orion, you will go where the rumblings have started in the forests of Albania. Orion nodded and Midas stood up, his long blonde locks swaying as he did so. This meeting is concluded. We will regroup here in a month. We all have our assignments. I will make sure that when the time comes, Our gold flows with a consistency and strength that has never been seen before," said Midas as he dismissed the rest of the inner circle. "This might be a mistake, but this is the best way to make sure that the Dark Lord takes it easy on us," thought Midas as he retired that title for the day and moved back to being Lucius Malfoy. A.N. That's all I got for y'all today. It's early in the morning, about 1 a.m., and I wanted to get this chapter out to y'all. Join the Discord and get a free console or $200. Plus the people there are dope. Until next time, _Mars out. Chapter 5. Where is your mother, Draco? Questioned Lucius. I don't know, admitted Draco as he looked down at his father's feet, knowing better than to look his father in the eyes as an equal. Whack. The sound of the wooden cane meeting Draco's face echoed throughout the dining hall of Malfoy Manor. The answer that Draco had given was not the one that Lucius was going to accept. You pathetic little shite. Mind your tongue before I decide whether or not to have it ripped from your ungrateful mouth, hissed Lucius in anger, his eyes narrowed and cold. Draco could feel the bruise forming on his left cheek almost immediately, the throbbing ache of pain burrowing under his cheek until it reached his very soul. Now, where do you believe your mother to be? Asked Lucius once more. In the drawing room, talking to Mrs. Knott, answered Draco. Whack. The cane caught him in the left eye this time, causing it to welt up instantly as Draco lost all sight abilities through his left eye. If you knew that, why didn't you tell me the truth the first time, you fucking brat? Hissed Lucius before he dismissed Draco with a wave of his hand. The minister will be having dinner with your mother and I today, make yourself invisible. Draco bowed to his father as he left the dining hall and made his way up to his room, each step sending a new jolt of pain through his face as it shifted side to side with each step. Father was in one of his moods. This was going to be a long summer. Why? Draco was a bit curious to what could cause his father to be in such a bad mood so early in the summer vacation. It couldn't have been his grades. He had gotten most E's with one acceptable in history. But nobody cared about history class at Hogwarts. It was taught by a bloody ghost. Perhaps it had to do with the frequent visitors that they had been having. Father was not one to shy away from socializing. It was how he made his money after all. But they had not thrown a ball or a party all summer long, but more and more men in traveling cloaks continued to pay them visit. A business deal that has gone bad. No, Father would be ranting and raving about how real men stuck to their word, how nobody pulled one over on a Malfoy. Father was many things, but someone to be taken advantage of was not. Draco tried to think as he finished the climbing of stairs up to his room, the chatter of his mother and Mrs. Knott from down the hall in the drawing room capturing his attention. From what he could remember, Mr. Knott and his father had both been foundational followers of the Dark Lord. It was why Mrs. Knott and his mother were such good friends. They had met through their husbands. As silently as he could, Draco made his way to the door to the drawing room and pressed his ear against it, being able to actually understand what the women inside were saying. Nobody thought that Draco knew about this, but he knew that his father had wards set up to allow him to eavesdrop on Mother and her friends. Why? It was none of his business. Do you find it refreshing to have hope once more? Asked Mrs. Knott. I have given it some thought. We have a path forward into a brighter future now, replied Mother. You don't actually believe that, do you? Asked Mrs. Knott. You know I don't, replied Mother. Then we are in the same group once more, admitted Mrs. Knott. You know how much I dislike the danger of them putting on their masks again for that man. He is the champion of Slytherin. The man with the purest blood in the wizarding world. The Black family were proud supporters and Lucius agrees with my family in supporting him, said Mother. I do not disagree with the message. Blood is the most important thing that you can have in this world. You have to pair with the right kind of person to get the best results, but the methods are almost pure madness, said Mrs. Knott. I know, added Mother, seeing Lucius put on that mask and turn into Midas once more is not something I ever wanted to see. We have enjoyed peace so much over these last couple of years since he vanished that night at the Potters. I do not wish to see another war if we do not have to. Lucius has already slipped back on the Midas mask? Asked Mrs. Knott. Draco was unable to see the reply given. He could only assume that his mother gave a nod of confirmation based off the next set of words. Theodore Sr. has already slipped back on his specter mask as well, continued Mrs. Knott. It would seem that the dark days are coming upon us sooner than we think. He had all of them here the other day. He thinks that I am unaware of what is transpiring. But I know that all of them besides the ones in Azkaban and the one in Hogwarts were here recently. They're going to find him and we will all be plunged back into the chaotic darkness once more," stated Mother. Draco shivered at those words. What was Mother going on about? Surely the return of the Dark Lord would bring about nothing but gold and status for pureblood families such as his own. Father had always said that the Dark Lord treated his own with handsome rewards, yet Mother made it seem as if his return would bring about nothing but bad omens. "I believe it is time that I head home. My husband and I like to have dinner together," said Mrs. Knott. "I will walk you to the apparition spot," said Mother. Draco's eyes widened as he realized that he could be caught, and he carefully slipped away before they opened the door. He heard the click of the door hinges right as he slipped into his own room down the hall, and he could feel his heart beating with a force that he had never felt before. The Dark Lord was alive. And it was not as great as they made it seem? Draco laid down as he felt a headache start to come on. With Harry. For the first time in his life, Harry felt that summer had arrived and departed faster than he would have liked. This was maybe the first time in his entire life that he had actually enjoyed a summer break. The weirdest thing that had happened was that his request to have his parents' will unsealed had been blocked by the government. Fudge had sent him a letter explaining that the vote through the internal system had been denied and he was to wait until he was 16 like every other orphan in the wizarding world. Fleur, the amazing French witch, that had become one of Harry's better friends in such a short time, had gone back to France with 3 weeks left on break. She needed to get ready for her 6th year, which Harry learned was when the French took their owls. They had remained pen pals, exchanging at least 1 letter per week, sometimes as many as 3. Harry had to admit that he missed having her around. It had been nice to have someone who had been close to his age around during the summer. He missed his 16-year-old friend more than he would admit. Sirius said that meant someone with money or influence saw the request and gathered his supporters in the government to say no, but also according to Sirius, much to Harry's surprise, it couldn't have been Dumbledore because he didn't have the political cash to get a motion like that passed. No, it had to be someone with old money and familial power per Sirius, which meant that it was not anyone Harry or Sirius would know at this time. Speaking of Sirius, Harry had listened to the man and he found that he was brutally honest with him all the time. Harry had learned of his time at school and found that Sirius, his father, a man named Remus Lupin, and a cowardly man named Peter were all best friends. Harry also learned that all 4 of them were giant assholes who bullied and pranked most of the student body for 6.5 years. It had been a different time. Voldemort was rising up and they had thought that the school needed a good laugh every now and then. However, the issue with their time was that there just so happened to be so many blood purists at the time and it was easy for them to get carried away, or that is how Sirius told the stories. Harry thought maybe they just lacked self-control like most teenagers, but he found the frequent stories of Snape interesting. "So he liked my mum?" asked Harry. The greasy git was absolutely smitten with her. "They were the best of friends until the end of our 5th year when he called her a racial slur," answered Sirius. "How did that happen?" asked Harry. Sirius blushed bright red as he recalled the events and muttered. "We were in the process of panting him after our owl's exams and things kind of just got away from us." That phrase, "things kind of just got away from us," popped up near the end of a lot of Sirius stories about his youth. Aside from stories of Harry's dad and mom, Sirius had been a great asset to Harry's studies. Sirius, coming from a fairly elderly wizarding family, was extremely well versed in runes of most tongues. He helped Harry understand concepts that even Fleur had issues understanding, let alone being capable of teaching. Harry was able to learn much more about how to craft rune arrays, how magic flowed, and how to understand the theory side of magic. "There is more to casting spells than fancy wand work," advised Sirius. "There is a reason that so many magical families hammer in the theory side of things before sending their kids off to school." Harry had always found it boring, but since he had grown more interested in runes, he had decided to give it a more honest attempt. It was still boring, but it made more sense than it ever had before. Which led them to this moment, standing together on platform 9 3/4 and looked up to see the Hogwarts Express, a scarlet steam engine, puffing smoke over a platform packed with witches and wizards seeing their children onto the train. Sirius was only there because he was hidden under a glamour spell that made him look like a nondescript brown-haired pale Brit, as well as a series of runes that created a ripple effect around his face if anyone looked too hard at him. "You ready?" asked Sirius. "I wish I could stay with you," admitted Harry. I do too, kid, but I will be back at the apartment, said Sirius as he pulled his godson into a tight hug, trying to let him know that this had been the best summer of his life. I'm going to get you a trial, whispered Harry. Let me figure that out, brat, whispered back Sirius before the pair of them broke apart and Harry blinked away a couple of tears that had welled up in his eyes. Stay out of trouble, warned Sirius. I will try, said Harry. Good enough for me, chuckled Sirius. You better get on the train before you get a shit compartment. Harry nodded and Sirius tapped his trunk, making it as light as a feather, and ruffled Harry's hair. Write me every week, brat. I promise, replied Harry. If Dumbledore gives you any shit for anything, tell him you know about Maeve in 1976 and how he covered it up, said Sirius before he disappeared with a wink. Lifting his trunk, Harry made his way onto the train, but he didn't get very far before a hand clamped down on his shoulder. Turning around, he saw that the hand belonged to Draco Malfoy, and he looked far different than the young boy who had previously exclaimed that, all mudbloods have to go. No, this Draco Malfoy looked a bit thinner, taller, and more emotion was seen in his eyes than Harry could remember ever seeing. He also looked scared, as if he was the one being hunted rather than the Muggleborns. Can I talk to you? Asked Draco. Sure, answered Harry. This summer had taught him a lot about the world that he had previously never considered. Sirius was from a proud pureblood family and he had turned his back on almost everything that they stood for. Draco was here, looking scared and alarmed. This might be his moment to follow a path like Sirius. Where are your bodyguards? Asked Harry, sitting in a compartment on the south side of the train. I was looking for you, answered Draco honestly. The pair of them slipped into an empty compartment and Harry slapped a pre-written silencing ward rune on the door, giving the two of them a moment of privacy. You learned runes, noted Draco. This was an eventful summer. I've learned a lot of new tricks, shrugged Harry. This was an eventful summer for me as well, said Draco before he gulped. Tell me, Potter, what do you know about the Dark Lord? Harry twisted his face as he thought about it. What did he know about the Dark Lord? Less than he probably should, but why was tea important? Not much, just that he was a child-killing wanker, stated Harry. Draco nodded as if that was the right answer, and if I told he was alive? Harry felt a shard of ice explode in his chest at those words because it was not the first time that he had heard those words. No, someone in his very first year told him that Voldemort was alive and apparently, nothing was being done about that. You sure about that? Asked Harry. My father is one of his inner circle members, Midas. He's been calling meetings with all the remaining free members at the house all summer long, confirmed Draco. Harry felt panic build inside of his body, like a soda pop bottle that had been shaken. Why are you telling me this? Asked Harry, because I've learned that the Dark Lord is not going to bring about some era of peace in the wizarding world. I've overheard a conversation about how terrible he treats his followers and how ruthless he is to the world, said Draco as he licked his lips. My father is already a cruel man. I am scared that he might be a bigger monster than anyone has ever admitted. Harry took deep breaths as he tried to process that Draco was admitting that Voldemort was not only still alive, but his followers were slowly rallying. Why tell me? Asked Harry. Because you came up several times, there was something about you and fate repeated over and over again, said Draco. Do you think I should tell Dumbledore? Harry shook his head. Dumbledore has known that he's been alive for years. He even told me so back in first year. Draco stiffened. What? It's a scary thought, isn't it? Asked Harry. Draco nodded. I have to get back to Crabbe and Goyle. They might be starting to wonder where I am. Harry nodded. Is there anything else that I should know? Draco's nose wrinkled as he thought for a moment. Oh yeah, one of the inner circle works at Hogwarts. His codename is Chiron. My father said he might not be trustworthy anymore. It's fucking Snape, realized Harry as he remembered what the shade of Riddle had told him as he started dying. Riddle opened his mouth and black ink leaked from the corners instead of blood, because even though I am from before Lord Voldemort's time, I can still feel my own magic inside the castle. The potion's master, Severus Snape, he bears the mark of my magic on him very soul. Snape was your follower? Harry half asked, half realized. Riddle dropped to the ground, his body landing on all fours. Despite whatever pain he was going through, he still managed to nod. Thank you, Draco, said Harry. I appreciate you telling me all of this. I'm sorry about these past 2 years, I just want things to be normal, whispered Draco. Harry extended his hand to Draco. Maybe we can be friends. Draco shook the hand and said, I'd like that. Harry ripped the rune array off the door and they exited the compartment, going their own ways. Hey, there you are, said Ginny as she came walking down the corridor. Was that Malfoy? Yeah, answered Harry as they both watched him walk away. He looks different, noted Ginny. What did he want? Trying to get his yearly quota of insults done early? No, he came to warn me about some stuff he overheard at his house, said Harry. And you believe him? Asked Ginny. Harry nodded. He's changed because I think he realized the same thing that I did at the end of last year. All these people in charge don't care about us. They want us to do as we are told and nothing more. Well, that's good I guess, said Ginny before she waved down Hermione and Ron, who both looked really excited to see Harry. They walked towards the front of the train and found the same compartment that they usually sat in was taken by a single occupant, a man sitting fast asleep next to the window. Harry, Ron, and Hermione checked on the threshold. The Hogwarts Express was usually reserved for students, and they had never seen an adult there before, except for the witch who pushed the food cart. The stranger was wearing an extremely shabby set of wizard's robes that had been darned in several places. He looked ill and exhausted. Though quite young, his light brown hair was flecked with gray. Who do you reckon he is? Ron hissed as they sat down and slid the door shut, taking the seats farthest away from the window. Professor R.J. Lupin, whispered Hermione at once. How do you know that? It's on his case, she replied, pointing at the luggage rack over the man's head, where there was a small, battered case held together with a large quantity of neatly knotted string. The name Professor R.J. Lupin was stamped across one corner in peeling letters. This is Remus that Sirius told me about, thought Harry with a smile as Ginny left to go meet her friends, but the main trio settled in. With Snape and Dumbledore. Hogwarts Snape felt the pressure of the world on his shoulders. Things had progressed faster than he could have ever imagined. Midas has asked me to make Harrow's strengthening elixir. It seems that they want to be fully prepared for when they find him, said Snape. Dumbledore let out a sigh, his mind trying to figure out how to make this situation work for them. Tom's followers were proving to be more loyal than he could have ever believed. What was driving them forward like this? Did they not remember the manner in which Tom treated them? Do they trust you? Asked Dumbledore. At this moment there is little reason to trust me, admitted Snape. I've been working with the biggest enemy of our Lord for the past decade. Would you trust me? Dumbledore shook his head. No. So, then what do you suggest that we do? Questioned Snape. Make the potions and regain their trust, said Dumbledore. Are you mad? Snarled Snape. Even if he's crippled physically, giving him that elixir will make him nearly back to his peak before the ritual being used to gift him a new body. Severus, we need to have you remain in the inner circle. You need to regain the trust of all of them and be in his good graces once he rises again. Tell me, Dumbledore, what is your plan to deal with him, the boy? But he was cut off, you senile old man. There is no way that he will ever be ready. He's fucking 13 years old. He's already gotten the best of him twice, and when his luck runs out and he's face to face with the Dark Lord in his peak form, he will still have the protection of his mother. Dumbledore, you are so brilliant and yet so stupid at the same time. How about you stop relying on hopes, dreams, and prayers and actually train the boy for what is to come? And allow him to realize that he might not ever be good enough? You would rather rely on dumb luck and a dying wish than actual talent? Enough. Make the potion as you were told. I look forward to one day having no master to tell me what to do, said Snape as he whirled around to leave the headmaster's office, but pausing when he heard Dumbledore speak. You are a man tied to two men's will. Perhaps you should make better life choices in the next life. The door slammed behind Snape. Malfoy Manor. Midas was happy that his son was no longer in the house. It made it easier to have Spectre and Prometheus come over. His wife was out of the house as well. A gentle nudge to go shopping was all it took. So, what do we know? Asked Spectre. We know that there has been increasing dark magic building up in Eastern Europe, answered Prometheus. The ministry has been asked about it several times so far. Looks like some of the smaller countries need assistance. What makes this so special? Asked Spectre. The dark magic comes with traces of possession, The only person I know who would be capable of such an action at this moment would be the Dark Lord, answered Prometheus. Eastern Europe, repeated Midas as he flicked his wand and a map covered the table before them and he looked down at it. Do we have any idea where? Prometheus nodded and he drew his wand and used magic to draw a circle in the southeast portion of Europe, the countries including Bulgaria, Greece, Macedonia, Serbia and Albania. I don't know anything about this part of Europe that would be of importance to the Dark Lord, admitted Espicitra. Midas studied the area of the map that was circle and tried to recall anything that would be of interest or noteworthy for the Dark Lord. His strained his memory and he remembered where he had first heard the rumor that the Dark Lord was still alive, when the defense against the dark arts professor had been killed 2 years ago. Where had it been that he had visited? Albania, whispered Midas as a soft smile grew on his face, his mind connecting the dots, before he repeated it with more confidence. Albania. Are you sure? Asked Spectre. Yes, Professor Quirinus Quirrell from Hogwarts traveled there almost 2.5 years ago. I remember the paperwork coming across the Board of Governors' desk. He went to Albania to study dark magic being performed through snakes, said Midas with glee. At the time, I thought nothing of it, it was just a small grant being asked, so we approved it. However, when he came back, he died that same year at Hogwarts during Harry Potter's first year. That was the first time the rumor of the Dark Lord being alive was heard. Prometheus nodded. Good enough for me. I will start the process of conducting a ritual to pinpoint us the location and we will move out as soon as possible. There was a tap at the window and Midas flicked his wand to allow the owl inside where it gave him a letter. Midas smiled. We will be waiting, boys. Chiron will be making the Harrow's strengthening elixir for the Dark Lord. Says there would be no greater pleasure than assisting the Dark Lord in regaining his former glory. A.N. I personally think this is a great chapter, but I could be wrong. If it was bad, I'm sure that you guys will let me know. Please consider joining my Discord server. I do giveaways, chat with the people in there daily, talk about the lore of my stories and more. Use invite code TVNJQPKN. Until next time, _Mars. Chapter 6. Hi, my birthday is coming up in the next 2 months and with that, I will be doing another giveaway in my Discord. Use invite code 6ARVPU4J. Last time I gave away a console, PS5 or Xbox Series S, or $200. This time I might just do a big Amazon gift card. Anyway, on to the story. Theodore Knott Sr. had a very simple part to play in this particular mission. It was a very easy task on a very easy mission for a very simple yet important overarching plan. Midas had put their quest to locate the Dark Lord as Chiron prepared to make one of the most difficult elixirs possible. But if anyone could do it, it would have to be that greasy arsehole. Knott took a deep breath as he mentally transitioned himself to Spectre. The signal already given, all he had to do at this point was wait. The soft pop of the aura arriving was easy enough for him to hear and Spectre smirked internally. They didn't ask any questions, instead blasting him backwards off his feet, sending him skidding down the street. There were gasps as the witches and wizards out in the public space of Diagon Alley witnessed the aurors using such brute strength. Spectre put his hands in the air from his position on the ground but was lifted into the air by magic and slammed against the wall. Normally, this would be extremely painful, but they had prepared by covering his entire body in a numbing paste made by Chiron. They then hit him with a full body binding charm, and he knew that the plan had worked to perfection. The Auror made a spectacle of dragging him through the streets before they popped him back to the ministry. Spectre never once flinched, worried, or even so much as resisted as they booked him, read him his charges, and put him in the overnight holding cell. The next morning, a very angry Midas accompanied by a team of Aurors and the minister, himself, opened the door to his holding cell. I demand to know what the meaning of this is, asked Midas, his eyes narrowed and his tone full of disgust. You cannot simply lock up a man of sure nobility as Knott for no reason, without cause. We have on good authority that Knott Sr., here, was smuggling artifacts embedded with dark magic, said one of the Auror, one that Knott recognized from his arrest. So, you searched him and found dark artifacts? Asked Midas, his voice growing cold. Well, no, stammered the same Auror. Then you recovered what he had stashed away, continued Midas. He didn't have time to stash anything, we restrained him. Immediately, said the Auror growing timider by the word. Then you found what he sold to someone else then? Demanded Midas, his words driving home the point that they had set up from the beginning. "We didn't see any transaction being made," gulped the Auror. "Then surely you found the residue of dark magic on my dear friend's clothing, right? You must have some proof of him doing something wrong before you decided to attack him in public and lock him up like some kind of animal," hissed Midas. "We didn't find anything," whimpered the Auror. Midas let out a pulse of magic and it felt like gravity increased for a moment on the Auror, his willpower not being strong enough to resist the pressure. "Minister Fudge, if your army of thugs is done treating my friend like a criminal, I would like to be released at once," said Midas as his tone grew warmer and friendly, a bright charming smile on his face. Fudge barked out orders to the Aurors and Spectre smiled as Theodore Knott Sr. was released from the holding cell. He gave Midas a nod of appreciation and was led away by the Auror, who for their part did look rather apologetic. But it didn't matter, the mission had been a success and all Spectre had to do was give his version of the story to Skeeter, and before the end of the week, the story would be everywhere. As Spectre walked down the hall, his ears picked up a faint but confident line from Midas: "I believe it might be time for us to have a reform of kind minister." A lot of people thought that Midas was a codename given due to his extreme wealth, but that was not the source of the nickname. No, true Inner Circle members knew that the name Midas was because the Dark Lord once said that Lucius Malfoy had more than a silver tongue, he had a golden tongue. The phrase had fit, and during the peak of the war, everything Midas had to do seemed to turn to gold. The name was a compliment of the highest order from the Dark Lord. The smile on Midas' face was not one of the political ones, now it was a real unfiltered joyous smile on his face. Because very rarely did a plan go as smoothly as this one, even one as simple as this one. Theodore Knott Sr. was a known former Death Eater. Nobody knew that he was Spectre of the Inner Circle other than other members of the Inner Circle. However, he was also a pureblood, and that meant that the world bent to his will no matter what. The world just didn't know it yet. "What exactly did you have in mind?" asked Minister Fudge, unknowingly fumbling even deeper into the web that was Midas. "Plan. I would imagine that we should first start with some respect for people of a certain stature. Don't you think that would be wise?" asked Midas. "Would you let the Auror treat you like that?" Fudge blinked at the series of soft probing questions, before he admitted, "No, I would be completely outraged if this had happened to me." "Would you want your friends treated like this? Would you want the fellow alumni that you walked the halls of Hogwarts with to have to deal with any type of treatment like this?" questioned Midas as they walked towards Minister Fudge's office. "No," whispered Fudge. Midas was glad that Fudge was leading the way, because he missed the smirk of victory that graced Lucius Malfoy's face before he whispered back, "Then what are you going to do about this, Minister?" Hogwarts. The dark, miserable, cloudy sky cast a gray tint over the outside world. It looked cold, and that is because it was. Hogwarts had never been known for its beautiful weather, and the presence of the Dementors did nothing to add anything positive to the woeful weather. And ever since his fainting spell on the train, Harry tried his best to stay clear of the cloaked depression bringers. Harry had been waiting for the bottom to fall out with Draco, but as September came and went, October passing by, and November arriving, things had continued to be the same. Draco was much more polite than he had ever been before. Draco was also a source of knowledge on the current state of the pureblood world, including that the Aurors had been getting in trouble for needlessly arresting several purebloods around the UK. Neither Harry nor Draco were able to put a finger on why that was happening, but it seemed to be happening more frequently than it ever had before. Draco was certain it was part of a plan, but he didn't have proof. Harry felt that Draco had part of it right, but he could not see what exactly was going on himself, and when he reached out to Snuffles aka Sirius, he was told that this was probably to get some kind of vote of no confidence in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. But according to Sirius, that had also never happened before. The ministry was simply too big to be taken down. Although Sirius noted this would be a hell of a start if that was the plan. Ron and Hermione were not the biggest fans of the newfound Harry-Draco friendship and made sure to make their feelings known. Harry ignored them and said that it was something he could deal with on his own. As the Christmas or Yule season break got closer, Harry was still trying to figure out a way to get Sirius a fair trial. Sirius had sent him some books based on magical theory, and Harry had been taken back by the summary before the book even began. Magic is a multifaceted concept that encompasses various beliefs, practices, and interpretations across cultures and history. It is often associated with symbols, correspondences, energy, intent, connection to the divine, the law of attraction, and psychological interpretations. Symbols and correspondences in magical traditions correspond to certain energies or forces in the universe, which practitioners use to manipulate these energies. Energy is believed to be a universal force that can be manipulated through focused intent, often through techniques like visualization, meditation, and ritual. Magic is also believed to connect with the divine realms, with practitioners often working with deities or spirits to aid their magical work. The law of attraction, which states that like attracts like, suggests that by focusing on positive thoughts and intentions, individuals can attract positive outcomes into their lives. From a psychological perspective, magic is seen as a form of symbolic action that helps individuals tap into their subconscious minds and bring about personal transformation. In essence, magic is a complex and multifaceted concept that aims to bring about change in individuals' lives. Based on the summary before the book even began, Harry understood why Sirius had sent him this book. It fit into his current fascination with runes. He was reading the book down by the lake. A bubble of warm summer air surrounded him, created by runes on the blanket that he was sitting on. Harry had taken to inscribing runes on just about everything that he thought he could enhance, so even with the bitter cold weather as the Dementors patrolled the outside perimeter of the castle, Harry still wanted to be outside. Hermione and Ron hadn't wanted to come outside with him, but Ginny had shyly asked if she could join him, and Harry hadn't seen a reason not to let her tag along. So, they were both reading in silence on the frost-covered grass when Draco came approaching. Ginny stiffened upon seeing him, but Harry ignored that. She, like Hermione and Ron, had a hard time adapting to this version of Draco, and he understood that, but at some point they would accept him. "Potter," greeted Draco, before he turned to Ginny, "Ginevra." Ginny blinked at the saying of her full name, and Harry internally laughed at the taken-back, stunned look on her face. "Draco," greeted Harry, "what brings you out into my little slice of summer?" Draco took a step closer and was in awe as the slicing cold morphed into pleasant warmth. "Bloody hell, Potter. One day you gotta show me how you do things like this." "It's runes, Draco, you know that," teased Harry. "Why are you out here looking for me?" "Oh, yeah, that," said Draco as he slowly recovered from his moment of amazement. "I believe that I found a way to help you out with that issue you encountered over the summer." Draco glanced at Ginny and then back to Harry, who gave him a subtle shake of the head, indicating that he hadn't told her about Sirius. "Really, how did you manage that? I've been researching methods to resolve it myself, but I haven't come up with anything that could work," admitted Harry. "You might have this newfound appreciation for magical theory." "Potter," started Draco, "but you are still extremely new to the rest of the wizarding world. People such as myself, as well as most other pureblood families, attend a school before Hogwarts, where we learn things such as politics, manners, customs, and of course the law." Harry's eyes widened in understanding. "So, what is the solution that you managed to work out? How do you know that it's going to work?" "Because this is the same way he used to conduct business," said Draco, both Harry and Draco knowing that he referred to Lucius Malfoy. "So it's a little underhanded?" asked Harry. "No, it's more about taking your complaint to the people who can actually do something about it," answered Draco. "You can't tell people who can't do anything about it, you have to tell the people at the top." Harry let out an "ah" as he put together what Draco was talking about. In order to get Sirius the trial that he deserved and needed, he had to not go to a low-level order, he needed to complain to the head of the department. "And how do we do that, Susan Bones?" said Draco. "The Hufflepuff?" asked Ginny. "Yes, her aunt is one of the higher-level officials in the ministry," said Draco. "If you reach out to her aunt, you will probably get what you want." Harry frowned. "It's a little wrong to use her just to get to her aunt, isn't it?" Draco shrugged. "It might be a little frowned upon." Ginny rolled her eyes and said, "Boys are so stupid, just ask her if her aunt would be willing to hear you out." Draco raised an eyebrow. "You think it is really that simple?" Ginny snorted. "Duh. Harry is the boy who lived, and a celebrity. Half the girls in the castle have a crush on him. If he wants a favor from a girl, he would simply have to ask, and most of them would bend over backwards for him." Draco nodded with his face twisted into equal parts impressed and understanding. "She right. You are literally a well-known beloved celebrity. That was rather Slytherin of you to be straightforward and try to get what you want by surprise, Ginevra," complimented Draco. Ginny wrinkled her nose at Draco. "Nobody but my mom calls me that, everyone else calls me Ginny." Draco bit his lip. "You know that's a house elf name, right?" Ginny blushed redder than her hair and Harry leaned back and laughed loudly as Draco also turned a bright red from embarrassment. The last runes class before break was more interesting than anything Harry had experienced in the class beforehand. The professor spoke and the chalkboard copied her words down in plain perfect handwritten chalky letters. As many of us know, magical runes are an ancient writing system used by various Germanic peoples, including the Vikings, Anglo-Saxons, and others. They are often associated with magical and mystical properties, and their use in divination, spellwork, and other magical practices is based on several key theories. Symbolism and power. Each rune has its own unique shape, name, and symbolic meaning, often representing concepts such as strength, protection, fertility, or change. The theory behind magical runes is that by inscribing or invoking these symbols, practitioners can tap into the inherent power and meaning associated with each rune. Connection to the divine. In Norse mythology, runes are believed to have been discovered by the god Odin, who hung himself from the world tree, Yggdrasil, for 9 days and nights to receive divine wisdom. As such, runes are often seen as a means of communicating with the divine and accessing spiritual insight and guidance. Energetic properties. Like other symbols and sigils used in magic, runes are believed to have energetic properties that can be harnessed and directed by practitioners. By focusing on a particular rune and its associated meaning, practitioners can channel specific energies to achieve their desired outcomes. Divination. One of the most common uses of runes is in divination, where practitioners cast or draw runes and interpret their meanings to gain insight into a situation or receive guidance. The theory behind runic divination is that the runes will reveal hidden truths or insights that can help the practitioner navigate their life's path. Personal empowerment. Some practitioners believe that the act of inscribing or invoking runes can have a transformative effect on the individual, helping them to align with their inner strengths and qualities associated with each rune. Those theories are usually based in some fact, with a mixture of the truth and myth being passed down from generation to generation. Each one of these principles is correct. Each will power your runes if you simply believe in the theory behind the use. However, if you want to create your own runes, you must master intent. Magical intent refers to the focused and directed will or purpose behind a magical spell, ritual, or act. It is the mental and emotional energy that a practitioner channels toward a specific goal or outcome. In magical practices, intent is considered crucial, as it is believed to be the driving force behind the manifestation of desired outcomes. The idea is that by clearly defining and focusing on one's intent, practitioners can align their energies with the desired outcome and increase the effectiveness of their magical work. Intent is often emphasized in various magical traditions and is seen as a key component of spellcasting and ritual work. Practitioners are encouraged to be specific and clear about their intentions, visualizing the desired outcome in detail and infusing their actions with strong emotions and belief. However, intent alone is not always sufficient. It is often combined with other elements such as symbolism, ritual, and the use of tools or ingredients to enhance its power. Together, these elements create a framework through which practitioners can work to manifest their desires and bring about change in accordance with their will. Harry left that class with Hermione, both of them seemingly in a trance of awe and thought at their professor's words. Hermione was more in awe at the many different applications that runes could have, making spells that would wear off more permanent or reactivating already existing runes. But Harry was much more interested in the creation of new runes, how his will and intent could be used to guide his magic into creating an array that he himself was not sure of how to make or craft. Draco met them and said, "Today's the day, Potter." Harry felt a bubble of nervous energy in his chest but nodded, walking away with Draco as he parted ways with Hermione. Draco apparently knew where Susan Bones was because he led them through the castle to the library and to corner near the charms section. "You know what to do. You need to be flattering, you need to remain calm, you need to be confident about yourself," said Draco. "Anything else?" asked Harry. "Yes, don't be afraid to offer a favor in exchange," said Draco. She might never actually bother to cash it in, but it would be seen as polite as well as socially correct. Harry nodded and Draco inspected his uniform with an eye for anything wrong before eyeing his hair with disdain. Harry rolled his eyes at the jab at his messy locks before making his way towards Susan Bones. "Hi," said Harry, not knowing where else to start a conversation. "Oh my, Harry Potter," greeted Susan, Her accent was rather Irish. But Harry found it to be more cute than annoying, like his dorm mate. "Yeah, that's me," joked Harry. "I know I don't know you all that well, but I had an issue that I was hoping that your aunt would be able to help me with." "Oh," said Susan, her voice shaky with Harry could tell was disappointment. "I guess I could pass along a letter to her." I don't want you to think I'm trying to use you," stammered Harry. "I will give you a favor in exchange." Susan's eyes sparkled as those words, a favor from someone like Harry, could be worth his weight in gold. "I need help in charms class. My wand work is rather poxy." Harry shrugged. "Next term, I can help you every Saturday." Susan smiled brightly. "Deal. Give me the letter today and I'll take it home to my aunt. I promise not to read it." "I wouldn't do that to you, Harry." Harry smiled at her in turn. "Thank you, Susan." Harry pulled the letter out of his book bag and handed it to Susan, who immediately put it into her own book bag. "I'll see you around. We'll probably send you an owl over the break to set up a time for the tutoring sessions," said Harry. "It's a date," said Susan. "Only if you want it to be," joked Harry before he snickered as Susan blushed and he walked away. He was barely out of the library when he saw Dumbledore standing in the hallway, waiting for him. He hadn't spoken to the older man almost all semester, yet right before break, here he was like clockwork. "Mr. Potter," greeted Dumbledore. "Professor Dumbledore," greeted Harry in turn, unable to hide the slice of icy disdain from slipping into his tone. "Do you have a moment?" asked Dumbledore. "You wouldn't be here if you didn't know I had a free moment," countered Harry. Dumbledore gave a soft smile. "You might be one of the quickest students to ever walk these halls." Dumbledore gestured. "Let's take a walk." Harry nodded, his wand trained in his hand as he followed Dumbledore. He knew that it would do him no good, but having it on hand was probably the even 0.00000000001% chance that he would have against Dumbledore. "You wouldn't be needing your wand, Mr. Potter," said Dumbledore without turning around, "but I understand if you feel the need to have it out. I don't happen to like the Dementors all that much either." Harry nodded. "They make it feel like I might never be happy again." "Yes, that is actually the reason that I've approached you, Mr. Potter," said Dumbledore. "The incident at the Quidditch game was something I would rather not have a repeat of." At least 100 Dementors, their hidden faces pointing up at him, were standing beneath him. It was as though freezing water were rising in his chest, cutting at his insides. And then he heard it again. Someone was screaming inside his head, a woman. "Not Harry, not Harry, please not Harry," pleaded a woman. Was that his mother? "Stand aside, you silly girl, stand aside, now." This voice was cold, devoid of any emotion and sounded vaguely familiar. "Not Harry, please no, take me, kill me instead," pleaded his mother once more. Numbing, swirling white mist was filling Harry's brain. What was he doing? Why was he flying? He needed to help her. She was going to die. She was going to be murdered. He was falling through the icy mist. "Not Harry, please, have mercy, begged his mother. A shrill voice was laughing, the woman was screaming, and Harry knew no more. It was one of Harry's least favorite moments of the school year so far. A moment he would definitely rather never happen to him again. Although with that thought, Harry was taken back. Dumbledore was not here about his living situation. This was going in a vastly different than he had believed it to be. "I am unsure if you are fully aware of Professor Lupin's connection to your parents, but he was a childhood friend of your father's, Harry," said Dumbledore. "I will admit that it is part of the reason that I brought him in this school year. I wanted to give you a chance to hear about your father from someone other than myself or Snape. Both of us might hold a bias. I thought that your father was a brilliant young man, incredibly creative and capable of complex feats of magic even if it was just for a prank. Snape, being on the receiving end of THSE pranks, will tell you that your father is one of the worst men to ever walk the face of this planet. The truth is, Harry, your father was somewhere in between. A skilled flyer similar to yourself, but more of a show-off than you. He was talented, but he wasn't overly powerful, having a large amount of control and intent behind every spell. He was like you in many ways, a man who would break every rule for his friends but ultimately wanted to do the right thing. The biggest flaw that your father held was that he didn't like Snape and he allowed that ugly side of his talent to leak out time and time again." "You sound like you knew my father rather well, Professor," said Harry. I watched your father wander into this school as a curious 11-year-old boy and turn into an arrogant teenager and then into a respectable young man as he graduated Hogwarts, said Dumbledore fondly. Then of course, he was a member of the Order Faux the Phoenix. I've never heard of them, said Harry. They were a group of people who under myself fought against Lord Voldemort and his Death Eaters, answered Dumbledore. My father fought against Voldemort, whispered Harry. Both of your parents, Harry, added Dumbledore. Thank you, Professor, said Harry as he realized that they had been walking to his common room this entire time. I have arranged for Professor Lupin to teach you the charm to protect yourself from the Dementor. He will reach out to you at the start of next term, said Dumbledore. Have a good day, Harry. Harry nodded. Goodbye, Professor. The first 3 days of the break went about as well as Harry could have hoped. He sent Susan an owl thanking her for her help and how much he was looking forward to their study sessions once the term started back up. Sirius had sent him an owl with a note that said Peter was capable of morphing into a rat, the same ability that Sirius had with the black dog, and that he escaped because the rat that was missing a finger seen in the newspaper over the summer had been Peter. Apparently it was Ron's pet. Harry had to think of a way to capture him as soon as possible. It was on day 4 of the break that things went to shit, as the morning paper owls poured into the Great Hall. Harry paid for the newspaper and gave the owl a strip of bacon before he opened the newspaper and nearly dropped it in shock. Massive Ministry Blunder. Sirius Black Never Given a Trial? By Rita Skeeter. Apparently the lack of a trial for Sirius was not something that the public had heard about, and Harry read the article, finding that it was basically a long apology from the Ministry to Sirius and asking him to come forward for a fair trial. It was the classic Skeeter smear piece, but this time flipped onto the Ministry instead of a person. As Harry finished that article, he turned to the next one, and this one did make him drop the newspaper. Amid multiple blunders, Ministry temporarily disbands Aurors by Larson Pepperington. Sirius Black and his lack of trial might have been the nail in the coffin, a fitting Muggle saying at this moment. Over the last several months, multiple respected members of the pureblood community have been publicly arrested, yet none of them have spent more than a single day in a cell. Why is this? Because none of them have committed a crime or anything close to one. So, why have they been getting harassed, embarrassed, and publicly assaulted? Because the lackluster ability of the Auror Force to do the job that they are paid to do. Once is a mistake, twice is an accident, thrice is a pattern, 4 times is clearly targeting. Hence why pureblood witches and wizards have been outraged that their family members have been treated like the scum of the world, for no reason, apparently. The only thing worse than getting it wrong time and time again for months on end, is for it to be revealed that in the biggest, most important case that the wizarding world, the deaths of Lily and James Potters, parents of the boy who lived, also known as Harry James Potter, the Aurors and the entire Department of Magical Law Enforcement had gotten in wrong as well. At what point does it start to matter that the people we trust to police our world can't get the job done correctly? Last night was the day. As with the news of the lack of due process, the lack of a fair trail for Sirius Black has led numerous members of the Wizengamot to file a motion of no confidence for the entire department. And much to the surprise of many, both the conservative side and the progressive side agreed almost unanimously on the motion. Now, the question will be for how long the disband will last and whether or not we can train the Aurors to actually do their job. The rest of the article continued to question and slander the Auror Force, and Harry felt the unquestioned weight of panic in his chest. Malfoy Manor. Midas stood as Chiron entered the great hall of his home, the potion master holding something ever so carefully in his hands. Is that what I think it is? Asked Midas. Of course, this is Harrow's strengthening elixir as you asked for, said Chiron. I was unsure of whether or not you would make it, admitted Midas. I am as committed to the cause today as I was since our time roaming the halls of Hogwarts, said Chiron. If it will help the Dark Lord, I will do it willingly, now and always. Midas nodded, a confident smirk on his face. Good, because the time for us to strike is coming sooner than anyone would believe. Our plans have gone perfectly, and now that the government is in shambles trying to figure out how things have gone wrong internally. For so long, they will never be able to rally in time to put up a single ounce of resistance to our Lord when he returns. Chiron allowed a sinister half-smile to grace his face. Good, because it has been too long since the world has been reminded of his might. Midas nodded. I agree, brother. Spectre has found him and we plan to bring him back here by the new year. The full moon with the Harrow's strengthening elixir, you will be able to conduct a birthing ritual to give him a new body, but it will be enhanced by the full moon, realized Snape. You always were a little bit of a bookworm, no surprise that you figured it out, said Lucius. Will you be there? If you and the Dark Lord wish it to be so, said Snape as he realized that the world was about to be plunged into darkness faster than Dumbledore would be able to prepare for. Potter was but a child, he would be little more than a hint of dust on the Dark Lord's robes if they were to meet now. Well, it didn't matter now. Snape would have the benefit of being a double agent in this moment. No matter what side won, he would have a place on it, he was sure of it. This story has a lot of moving parts, but I feel that it is in one of the better plots that I have any story. This chapter also went longer than I wanted it to be, but I am happy with it. I have my own explanations for magic, for runes, for potions, for rituals in this story. I am sorry if that doesn't interest you, but that's just gonna be how this story will be. Harry is 13 years old, he is not currently dating anyone, but that could change within the next year or so. I didn't start trying to date girls until I was 14, so that's an age I would feel comfortable having him starting to explore dating. There is only one confirmed pairing in this story so far, Draco, Ginny, which you saw the start of in this chapter. Please consider joining my Discord, lot of great people from all over the world in there. Use invite code 6ARVPU4J. Until next time, High_Mars out Chapter 7 Fall 1980. Lord Voldemort, also known as Tom Riddle, was born into a traumatic childhood due to a love potion, leaving him unable to feel love. He was left in a Muggle orphanage, abandoned and unwanted. His traumatic upbringing led to a strong desire for power and control, driven by his obsession with immortality. Voldemort exhibited exceptional magical abilities and a lack of empathy, viewing people as mere tools for his own ends. His manipulative personality allowed him to gather a following of loyal followers known as Death Eaters, who were able to influence and control others through fear and intimidation. Voldemort's evil nature can be attributed to his traumatic upbringing, insatiable ambition, lack of empathy, manipulative personality, and his immersion in dark magic. Said the memory of Dumbledore to his group of followers, the self-proclaimed Order of the Phoenix. Tom was pulled out of the memory provided to him by his inner circle member, Chiron, with an emotionless face, but his red eyes danced with anger that promised the worst pain imaginable for the unlucky soul who would be faced with his wraith. You have done well, Chiron, hissed Tom. His words could have been mistaken for the tongue of his forefather, but they were in fact English. Have Spectre and Phidias make their way into the room on your way out. Chiron nodded, his long hooked nose bobbing up and down as he hurried to exit Tom's presence. Tom couldn't blame him. Chiron was a rather smart man, a brilliant potions maker and brewer, a talented spellcrafter, but he never held the stomach for their more serious acts of violence. Not that the dark-haired man wouldn't kill, he just preferred not to, and Tom was okay with that. Everyone in the inner circle served a purpose, with people such as Midas having a non-fighting role as well. The taking over of the wizarding world was not going to be done with just violence. Sometimes it required the right exchanging of money, the right whispered words into the right ears of the government officials in their pockets. The average Death Eater would be expected to raise their wand in his honor, willing to die for the chance at earning his respect, the chance to curry a single strand of his favor. But they were little more than pawns on the chessboard, pieces that could be smitten off the face of the world with the greatest of ease by the opposition and not even a glance of concern on his part. But the inner circle? They were his brothers and sister in arm, they were the few that he dreamed of crossing the finish line with. Despite the words of his once-upon-a-time favorite professor, Tom Riddle did have a soft spot for his inner circle. They were the lone people living on the planet that he held a single ounce of respect for, they were the founders of this mission of his, of theirs, and he would be saddened by the loss of a single one of them. Flidday entered and Tom smiled as she did. She was a tall woman with long, thick, shiny dark hair. Her face had a strong jaw, a thin mouth, and dark, heavily lidded eyes with long eyelashes. She was his hunter, the bloodhound that could track down anyone. Behind her was Spectre, a slender pale white man with slicked back black hair with strong goatee who was closer to Tom's age rather than the youthful age of the rest of the Death Eaters such as Midas or Flidday who were nearly a trio of decades younger. Spectre was a man who could make anyone disappear. Despite the vast age difference between Spectre and Flidday, they were a dynamic duo that combined to enforce his will no matter what. "My lord," they both greeted, but before they could bow, Tom waved his hands to dismiss the notion from either of them. "No need, my friends," said Tom. "I am sure you are both wondering why I have called the two of you to me." Flidday nodded and Spectre did not reaction. He was very comfortable allowing Flidday to take the lead as normal. "Chiron has done several great things for me in recent times," started Tom. "He has overheard a prophecy that tells of my potential downfall." "Impossible," hissed Flidday. "Silence," hissed Tom. "I did not ask for your opinion or comments on the matter." "Forgive me for speaking out of turn," whimpered Flidday before she quickly added, "My lord. Remember that I am a kind lord, but also remember your place and mind your tongue. You do not require it to be in your mouth to do your job," teased Tom before he shifted back into his kinder tone once more. "As I was saying, Chiron has overheard this prophecy that tells of my potential downfall, of this baby that was born as July dies but also born to people who have defied me thrice. I believe that it is either the Potters or the Longbottoms, but they have disappeared from the public," continued Tom. "Do you want us to find them for you?" asked Spectre as he realized that Tom had paused for a reason. "No, I would not waste your time finding people who could not be found. They have most likely hidden behind the Fidelius charm. It would be a waste of your time, talent, and effort to have you chase those who could not be chased," replied Tom. "No, I want you to find the safekeepers." "The safekeepers?" asked Spectre. "Yes, they're the key to finding the families who actually pose a threat to me," said Tom in a matter-of-fact tone. "The Potters want people to think their safekeeper is Sirius Black, but that is nothing more than a ploy. I believe it will be someone different, someone that nobody will expect." Flidia's face twisted into an angry snarl at the mention of her cousin, but she held her tongue this time and Spectre pondered who it could be. "Tell me, Flidday, you went to school with Potter, if not Black, who would they trust?" asked Tom to Flidday. "Remus Lupin or Peter Pettigrew," answered Flidday after a moment of thinking. Tom thought about the two men. He knew of both of them. Remus Lupin was a werewolf rights activist, a man who proudly worked for the betterment of the werewolf community. Someone who held a decent amount of sway in that community, but the very fact that he was a werewolf would complicate things. He would be proud and loyal to his friends as they would be seen as his pack by his inner wolf. Loyal and influential, but also technically a dark creature despite his rather redeeming qualities. No, they would not trust him because despite his loyalty, they would always have questions about him due to his nature. But this man, Peter Pettigrew, he knew of the man. He was a man of lesser talents than Potter or Black. Tom had crossed wands with both of them. They were more than serviceable wizards. They would be worthy of inner circle status if they could be swayed, but Peter was a short portly man who was never the one who would rush into battle when he arrived, picking to battle the lower tier Death Eaters than take part in the main fights. Remus Lupin is loyal to them, but they will never show him the same respect, said Tom after his musing. Find Peter Pettigrew, he is the safekeeper for the Potter family. Do you want us to squeeze it out of him? Asked Flidday. No, my dear, we will not break this one with violence, said Tom, we will break him with kindness. Flidday shivered with delight as she mentally preparing for a hunt. Spectre could already hear her words and advice, stay focused, motivated, and ready to tackle your prey. Sadly, based on his experience with her, he knew that last part of the line was not figurative and more often than not, quite literal. Flidday has an enchanted knife that she loved to us. It was covered in series of runes that prevented it from being healed. The more you tried to heal it, the deeper the gash became, the wider the cut grew. Usually Flidday loved to use it when teenagers and watch in horror as their parents failed to heal them with their magic. Flidday nodded in agreement, taking the task at once to the surprise of neither of the men present. The rat will be found and brought to you at once, my lord. Tom tilted his head, his face twisted into a parody of curiosity. Rat? Flidday nodded in confirmation. It is one of the worst kept secrets during my time at Hogwarts. Remus Lupin is a werewolf. To help him with his transformations, the other three men in that friend group learned how to turn into animals. James Potter was a proud, large stag. Sirius Black is a large overgrown grim, and Peter Pettigrew is a small rat. Tom fidgeted with his wand, rotating it in small circles as he kept it pointed down, sparks flying out the tip as he started to chuckle. The animal that you turn into is often a reflection of who you are. Your soul's very essence brought forward into the physical world. Crackled Tom. Peter Pettigrew's nothing but a disgustingly pathetic rat, A man who will bite the hand that currently feeds him if the next hand he sees offers him something better. Remus was nervous as he sat in his classroom. The trial of the century was currently going on in the ministry and he couldn't bear to witness it. Was he a coward? Perhaps he was. But he had already lost his best friend once. He was not sure he could do it again. Whether or not he was a coward or not, he knew that this overwhelming feeling of dread was not natural. It was definitely caused by the chained-up Dementor in the corner of his classroom. I know that we weren't supposed to start these lessons until after the break, but with the constant attraction they have to you, we had to start while on break. The Dementors are a foul creature, said Lupin as he gestured to the chained-up cloaked. Okay, I agree with you, said Harry. So, Lupin had taken out his own wand and indicated that Harry should do the same. The spell I am going to try and teach you is highly advanced magic, Harry, explained Lupin, well beyond ordinary wizarding level. It is called the Patronus Charm. How does it work? Said Harry nervously. Well, when it works correctly, it conjures up a Patronus, said Lupin, which is a kind of anti-Dementor. A guardian that acts as a shield between you and the Dementor created by the opposite emotion. Harry had a sudden vision of himself crouching behind a Hagrid-sized figure holding a large club that was pointed at the Dementor, daring it to fuck around and find out. Lupin continued, the Patronus is a kind of positive force, a projection of the very things that the Dementor feeds upon: hope, happiness, the desire to survive, but it cannot feel despair, as real humans can, so the Dementors can't hurt it. But I must warn you, Harry, that the charm might be too advanced for you. Many qualified wizards have difficulty with it. What does a Patronus look like? Said Harry curiously. Each one is unique to the wizard who conjures it. And how do you conjure it? With an incantation, which will work only if you are concentrating, with all your might, on a single, very happy memory. Happy memory? Asked Harry. Happiness is a complex emotional state characterized by joy, contentment, and well-being, influenced by biological, psychological, social, and environmental factors, started Lupin, trying to explain this concept to Harry. Happy memories are recollections of past experiences that evoke happiness, joy, and positivity. These memories can be related to various experiences, such as spending time with loved ones, achieving personal goals, or experiencing beautiful moments in nature. Happy memories are cherished for their lasting impact on well-being. However, happiness and happy memories are subjective and can vary greatly from person to person, as happiness is not a constant state, but a fluctuating emotional experience influenced by internal and external factors. Harry cast his mind about for a happy memory. Certainly, nothing that had happened to him at the Dursleys was going to do. Finally, he settled on the moment when he had first ridden a broomstick. No, that wasn't going to be enough. But how about the feeling of spending this summer with Sirius? Right, he said, trying to recall as exactly how it felt to find out that he was loved for, cared for, and that someone wanted him to be around. The incantation is this. Lupin cleared his throat. Expecto Patronum. Expecto Patronum, Harry repeated under his breath, Expecto Patronum. Concentrating hard on your happy memory. Oh, yeah, said Harry, quickly forcing his thoughts back to that first broom ride. Expecto Patronum. No, Patronum. Sorry. Expecto Patronum, Expecto Patronum. Something whooshed suddenly out of the end of his wand. It looked like a wisp of silvery gas. Did you see that? Said Harry excitedly. Something happened? Very good, said Lupin, smiling. Right, then, ready to try it on a Dementor? Yes, Harry said, gripping his wand very tightly, and moving into the middle of the deserted classroom. He tried to keep his mind on flying, but something else kept intruding. Any second now, he might hear his mother again, but he shouldn't think that, or he would hear her again, and he didn't want to, or did he? Lupin pointed his wand at the chains that were holding the Dementor back and jabbed his wand at it, releasing it. The Dementor, now free from the chain, turns its hooded face toward Harry, one glistening, scabbed hand gripping its cloak. The lamps around the classroom flickered and went out. The Dementor stepped from the box and started to sweep silently toward Harry, drawing a deep, rattling breath. A wave of piercing cold broke over him and he could feel the world around him slowly becoming further from his attention. Expecto Patronum, Harry yelled. Expecto Patronum, expecto. But the classroom and the Dementor were dissolving and Harry suddenly felt himself failing again through thick white fog, and his mother's voice was louder than ever, echoing inside his head. Not Harry. Not Harry. Please, I'll do anything. Stand aside. Stand aside, girl. Harry. Harry jerked back to life. He was lying flat on his back on the floor. The classroom lamps were alight again. He didn't have to ask what had happened. The Dementor was gone from the classroom. The room felt so much better without it floating in the corner. The sole reminder of the creature being in the room was the chains that laid curled up in the ground. I'm sorry about that, said Lupin, and Harry looked to the right and he could see Lupin sitting on the ground next to him, a bar of chocolate in his hand. He extended his hand and Harry took the offered chocolate from Lupin. The first bite brought a pleasant warmth that surged through his body and Harry didn't realize he was shivering. Until he stopped. I would ask what happened, but given that we're both on the ground, trailed off Harry as he took a second bite of chocolate. Perhaps I should have had you practice before having you actually face one of those nasty creatures, admitted Lupin, guilt clear on his face. No, I felt that was a good first try. I will practice the spell all week so when we try again, I will be better, proclaimed Harry. Lupin allowed a ghost of a smile to hit his face before it disappeared, and his face looked like he was in deep pain. Are you okay? Asked Harry. Lupin took a moment to answer. Yeah, I just wasn't expecting you to look like James in that moment. I don't know if Dumbledore told you, but I was actually really good friends with your father in school. He was one of my best friends. Harry nodded. He said that you were a childhood friend of my father's. We were like brothers. Realty, said Lupin as he gained a faraway look in his eyes, clearly lost in a fond memory as he continued. We would get up to all kinds of trouble. Each one of us was a master of a different skill. Your father was our transfiguration expert, I was potions master. Sirius could do runes better than anyone in the school, and Peter had a hand in ritualistic magic. We all were great at defense against the dark arts, but we all also had our specialties. It's what made us such a powerful group, to be honest. We all covered each other's weaknesses. You sound like you really miss him, noted Harry. I miss them more than I think words could explain, admitted Lupin as Harry split the rest of the chocolate and gave a chunk to Lupin. That was the best time of my life, Harry. There was no worries about the war efforts, we didn't have to worry about traitors, we didn't have to worry about anything but essays and classwork, what our next prank was. I'm sorry that you lost them, said Harry as he realized that much like Sirius, Lupin was another sad semi-broken man who had survived the war but didn't actually have much of a life after it. Lupin snorted. You're telling me that you're sorry is madness, Harry. I'm sorry because I'm telling you how much I miss your father when you probably miss him more than I could ever. Harry frowned. I actually don't miss him. I never got the chance to have any memories of him. Even with the Dementor attacks, I hear the moment of Voldemort killing my mom. I don't hear him. Lupin sighed. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard, but I guess it's nice that you know what her voice sounds like even if there were better moments for you to hear. Are you a werewolf? Asked Harry. Remus stiffened. Why on earth would you ask me that? You always take the full moon off, answered Harry. Snape makes us learn about werewolves on those days. He seems to get some kind of sick pleasure from teaching about werewolves whenever you miss a day of class. I am, said Remus. Is it painful? It can be. It doesn't change anything for me, said Harry. I still think you're the most brilliant teacher I've ever had. Remus smiled at Harry, obviously content not to speak on that matter anymore as silence filled the room as they both bit into the chocolate and Lupin was the one to break the silence. I want you to know that I am deeply sorry that I never looked after you post-war, Harry. I lost too much, starting with my parents, then your parents, then Sirius and Peter. I was not sure that I could look after you, and when Dumbledore sent me to round up the remaining packs of werewolves, I took the job without question and believed that he would take care of you. Harry blinked. No offense, but you probably were what? 20? 21? You weren't fit to be a parent for a baby who apparently looks like your dead best mate. Would it have been nice if you wrote to me? Sure, but we can't change what was done or not done. You're a weird child, so much calmer and kind than any of us would have been, said Lupin with a sad look. How long did they abuse you? Harry froze. Do I look like a daft man? Snarled Lupin. Dumbledore made sure that I was busy because I would have noticed how poorly you were treated. You're 13 years old and what, maybe 39 kilograms, 86 pounds. Anyone with a single ounce of common sense would be able to tell that you're too thin, you are too quiet. After how abused I was for being a werewolf, do you think I wouldn't be able to tell? Harry swallowed the suddenly very thick saliva in his mouth. What are you talking about? Lupin raised his hand and Harry flinched. Today might not be the day to talk about this, Harry, but one day soon. Dumbledore will have to answer to me for this. You would have been better off traveling with me as I figured out life than to be raised in a place where a raised hand results in a flinch. Harry nodded as Lupin closed his eyes, as Harry could pick up a hint of a rumbling deep inside of Lupin's chest. I will never go back there, whispered Harry. Dumbledore will die before you do, replied Lupin. Do you hate Sirius? Asked Harry suddenly. I don't know, replied Lupin. For a long time I did, but apparently he might be innocent. But for years, I've known him as the man who betrayed my best friend and killed my other best friend. Peter, right? Yeah. I heard that Peter Pettigrew could turn into a rat, said Harry, trying to think of a lie that would work on Remus. He liked the man, but Harry wasn't ready to reveal Sirius' help in this particular plot just yet. I think the twins mentioned overhearing one of their mum's friends mentioning that he could do that. We could all turn into an animal, Harry, joked Lupin. Yeah, but if Peter could turn into a rat, how do we know that he didn't cut off his finger and simply escape? Asked Harry. Lupin hissed as he held back an angry howl, his chest rumbling as the wolf inside slammed against the cage, demanding justice for his friends, for his brothers. A rat missing a finger that would have to be over 10 years old at this point, noted Lupin as he racked his brain. He didn't know anyone with a rat who would fit that list of features. But then again, if Peter did actually fake his death, the little shite could be anywhere in the fucking world. Why would he choose to remain in England? Lupin voiced this thought as well. Harry, there are hundreds of rats in the UK. Peter would have to be quite stupid to remain here. Besides, how many rats do you know that are missing a limb and over 10+ years old? Harry frowned and admitted, I guess just Ron's. Lupin's head snapped to Harry. I beg your pardon? Huh? Ron's rat is like 12+ years old at this point. It was actually Percy's rat first, but Ron got it when Percy made prefect, explained Harry. And it's missing a finger? Asked Lupin. Yeah, he's missing what would be the right index finger, answered Harry. Lupin snapped his wrist, flicking his wand and extending his non-wand hand as a piece of parchment flew towards him. Harry watched in wonder as Remus used the tip of his wand to write on the parchment before it glowed, and Remus turned to Harry. Wands out. The parchment lifted itself out of Remus' hand and turned into a small pointed arrow, slowly moved through the classroom and out the door. Remus and Harry followed the floating parchment as it traveled down the hall, seemingly knowing where it was going. What exactly are we doing? Asked Harry as they followed behind, no more than a couple of steps behind. Magic is something that varies in person to person, as it will feel different inside each of us. However, when you spend enough time around certain people for large stretches of time, you might become a bit more in tune with the manner in which their magic feels. Some people will tell you that our friends that we make in life are people whose magic calls out to us. Magic that exists on the same wavelength and draws in people of the same feel as yourself, explained Remus. Is that what you think? Asked Harry as they started to climb upstairs, still following. I find that you will meet people who you like and people who you will dislike all the same in life. Magic is a very powerful thing, but it's not going to make decisions for you, replied Remus. Sometimes the people you probably should like are a right wanker and not worth getting along with. And sometimes the pureblood trust fund brat is really a messy raven-haired young man with a heart of gold. Does that refer to me or my father? Asked Harry. Both, answered Remus. What did write on that piece of parchment? Questioned Harry as he had been racking his brain on what runes Remus could have used to get this type of result. Remember what I was telling you about the feeling of one's magic? Asked Remus. Harry nodded. When a witch or wizard goes through the practice of becoming an animagus, their animal form leaves an imprint on the way that their magic feels, continued Remus. A powerful wizard such as Dumbledore would be able to activate their mage sight and see the change in their magic, but that's not the only manner. Having worked on runes and arithmancy for many years, as well as working with Peter on various magical tasks for 7 years, I've seen his magical properties written down in runes and through arithmancy more than my fair share of times. So what? This piece of parchment is leading us to Peter in his rat form? Asked Harry. Remus nodded. That's incredible, whispered Harry as his respect for runes continued to skyrocket as he added another topic to add to his list of research. How do you remember what his magic felt like? Asked Harry as they continued to climb the stairs. I have heightened senses from being a werewolf. This also extends to things like magic sensitivity and memory. I remember what it feels like because I mostly remember everything, replied Remus. They arrived at the Gryffindor common room and Remus tapped his wand at the base of the fat lady's portrait and it swung open and the parchment flew through the opening and pointed at Ron who was relaxing on the couch by the fireplace. Oi mate, what are you doing with Professor Lupin? It's still the holiday break, asked Ron as he yawned lazily. Do you have an old pet rat? Asked Remus. Yay, what about it? Asked Ron, his eyes bouncing from Harry to Remus in confusion, his voice shaking as he struggled to figure out the question. May I see him? Asked Remus. Ron reached into his pocket and upon seeing Remus, Scabbers started to wiggle and whine in Ron's grasp as Remus pointed his wand at the rat. Upon seeing this, Ron clutched Scabbers closer to his chest. Oi, what's going on? Asked Ron. Remus growled as he looked at Rat before a bang went off and a fizzle of magic flooded out of his wand, sending Scabbers into the air. The rat hissed as it was kept suspended in the air and Remus jabbed his wand at Ron, wrapping the young boy up in ropes. My God, said Lupin softly, staring from Scabbers. His front paw, what about it? Said Ron defiantly. He's missing the toe that they found from Peter, said Harry. Of course, Remus whispered, so simple, yet so brilliant. Remus bit back a snarl before he added, he cut it off himself. Now what? Asked Harry. Remus circled the floating squirming panicky rat. Betrayal cuts deep into the core of trust and loyalty. It's a rupture in the fabric of relationships, leaving behind a trail of hurt, confusion, and often, lasting scars. When it's a friend, betrayal shakes the foundation of our beliefs, challenging our very understanding of the world. When it is someone who you call your brother, you destroy the very fabric of the relationship that you hold so dear. Faking one's death, on the other hand, is a drastic and dramatic act. It speaks of a desire to escape, to start anew, or perhaps to deceive. It's a pathetic twist that pulls on a mix of emotions, shock, disbelief, and even a hint of admiration for the audacity of such a move. You see, Harry, for those who commit such acts, there may be feelings of guilt, remorse, and profound sadness for the loss of both a friend and a part of themselves. It can also have a profound impact on the friends and loved ones left behind, who are left to grapple with the loss and the betrayal of trust. Isn't that right, Peter? The rat squawked as Remus finished his speech before a blistering rush of magic flowed from Remus' wand and washed over the rat. The flash of blue-white light erupted from his wands. For a moment, Scabbers was still frozen in the air before his small gray form started wiggling madly as the rat fell and hit the floor. There was another blinding flash of light and then it started. It was like watching a speeded-up film of a growing tree. A head was shooting upward from the ground. Limbs were sprouting. A moment later, a man was standing where Scabbers had been, cringing and wringing his hands. He was a very short man, hardly taller than Harry was currently. His thin, colorless hair was unkempt and there was a large bald patch on top. He had the shrunken appearance of a plump man who has lost a lot of weight in a short time. His skin looked grubby, almost like Scabbers' fur, and something of the rat lingered around his pointed nose and his very small, watery eyes. He looked around at them all, his breathing fast and shallow. Harry saw his eyes dart to the door and back again. Well, hello, Peter, said Remus pleasantly, as though rats frequently erupted into old school friends around him. Long time, no see. Ron gasped in horror as his pet rat had turned into an old man. What the hell is going on here? But everyone simply ignored him. Remus, even Pettigrew's voice was squeaky. Again, his eyes darted toward the door. My friend, my old friend. He caught sight of Harry. Oh my, Harry, it's been so long. Harry narrowed his eyes, and he used the same spell that Remus had used to tie up Ron, but his anger had warped the spell and instead of plain rope, a string of sharp biting barbed wire sprung out of his wand and wrapped around the man. Harry, please, this hurts, whimpered Peter as he struggled against the tightly coiled wire. Please, this isn't what your parents would have wanted. Oh please, do tell us what our dear friends, Lily and James, wanted from us, hissed Remus. Peter flinched at those words. Remus, gasped Pettigrew, and Harry could see beads of sweat breaking out over his pasty face. Serious, he tried to kill me. Remus, so, I had heard, said Lupin, more coldly. I'd like to clear up one or two little matters with you, Peter, if you'll be so. I had to hide, he was going to try and kill me again. Pettigrew squeaked suddenly. He killed Lily and James and now he's going to kill me too. You've got to help me, Remus. You've got to help me hide again. I know that you're lying, Peter, said Remus. You were always a pathetic liar and could never hold up under the pressure, Peter. Peter fell silent and Harry found that he couldn't tear his eyes from the man that Sirius had told him had betrayed his parents. This was the man who was responsible for why he didn't have a loving mom and dad. This is the man who is the reason he had grown up in a cupboard under the stairs. He is the reason that he was so famous for surviving what his parents had failed to. Why did you do it? Asked Harry, his voice cracking with emotion. Rage coiled up like a snake but pain splitting it like lightning with the sky. Pettigrew burst into tears. It was horrible to watch, like an oversized, balding baby, cowering on the floor. Blood started to ooze from the various places where the wire had bitten into his skin. His pained gasps of air filled the air. This man was every bit as much of a rat in human form as he had been in his literal rat form. Harry, Remus, what could I have done? The Dark Lord, you have no idea. He has weapons you can't imagine. I was scared. Remus, I was never brave like you and Sirius and James. I never meant it to happen. He who must not be named forced me. No, the protection of the spell couldn't be broken by a forced reveal, whispered Harry as tears began to flow from his eyes as Peter lied to them. He was taking over everywhere, gasped Pettigrew. What was there to be gained by refusing him? What was there to be gained by fighting the most evil wizard who has ever existed? Said Remus, with a terrible fury in his face. Only innocent lives, Peter. You don't understand, whined Pettigrew. He would have killed me. Then you should have died, roared Remus as the wolf inside of his chest demanded justice, died rather than betray your friends, as we would have done for you. Peter sobbed louder and Ron passed out as a wave of magic came rolling off of Remus, a thick crushing pressure that blanketed the entire room. You should have realized, said Remus quietly, if Voldemort didn't kill you, we would. Goodbye, Peter. No, Harry yelled. He ran forward, placing himself in front Pettigrew, facing the wand of Remus. You can't kill him, said Harry with his hands spread out in front of Peter. You can't. Why not? Asked Remus. He deserves nothing more than to suffer the fate that he said Sirius gave him. He deserves the same end result that he gave your parents, Harry. I agree, said Harry, but if we kill him, Sirius will never get the justice that he deserves. He deserves to be free. We need to turn him over to the Ministry to assist in his trial. Remus closed his eyes as he clenched his wand so tightly that Harry thought that it might snap from the force. He lowered his wand slowly and Harry turned as Peter started to mutter words of thanks. Harry's wand flashed red as blasted the man with a disarming spell, sending him across the room. Peter roared in pain as the barbed wire shredded parts of his skin and he whimpered as Remus walked over to him, standing over his once-upon-a-time friend. You should be dead, Peter, said Remus, if not from you know who killing you for not revealing the location, then from Sirius or my wand. You're beyond lucky that Harry is more James than Lily because James wouldn't have wanted you to die. Lily would have gut you herself. Just know that no matter what, one day you're going to be free, out and about in this world, and I am going to crush you like the pathetic sack of shite that you are. Because in the real world, Peter, when you have a rat problem, you do everything you can to exterminate them. That was the last thing Peter saw before a flash of red filled his vision and he knew no more. 4 days later, Ministry, Sirius Black has been cleared of all charges, came the booming voice that filled every single inch of the Ministry. The trial had been greatly aided by the turning over of a very much alive Peter Pettigrew. Hard to pin your murder on someone when you were openly alive. As such, the Ministry had been forced to admit that Sirius Black was free to go, but that mattered very little to this particularly well-dressed man. The freedom of his wife's cousin did very little for him other than provide another hammer-like blow to the cracks in the foundation that he had creating. The downfall of the Aurors as well as the entire branch of magical law enforcement had been merely part one of his plan. The second step had been getting the official title of the position that he had been holding for years unofficially, senior advisor to the minister. It was a paid position where all the gold that should have been entering his vault was swiftly diverted back into the minister's own personal pocket. This could be tricky to do, but they didn't call him Midas simply for his wealth, not it was the ability to manipulate everything he touched into a golden opportunity. There was a small paper trail that would pin the entire thing on the minister. The poor bumbling fool would be the sweetest victim he had ever had the pleasure of taking everything from. The newfound position gave him nearly minister-level access and clearance, which meant that he was welcome to travel into the belly of the ministry and visit someone who was not supposed to have any visitors. Peter Pettigrew, as I live and breathe, greeted Midas as he finally entered the room that gave access to the lone prison cell in the ministry. Malfoy, you are looking well, greeted Peter. Gone was the whiny voice. No, replacing the crybaby rat that he had been trying to sell himself as to Remus and Harry was replaced with the man who had willingly become a Death Eater, a man who had enjoyed the power that came with said title. Oh, are we on last name basis? Asked Midas, because while everyone else remembers that there were 15 members of the inner circle, I had the privilege of being the Dark Lord's right-hand man. Ah, so it is not pretty boy Malfoy who comes to pay dear old Lilmy a visit, but rather the powerful Midas, noted Peter. You were always so observant, replied Midas. It was one of the things that made you the perfect safekeeper. You were always aware of your surroundings. Everyone knew that, isn't that right, Wormtail? Peter gave a small snort at the use of his nickname in such a mocking manner but didn't give any other sign that it had bothered him. Why are you here, Midas? Asked Peter. Midas waved his wand and set up a cone of silence around them. Nobody but Peter and Midas would be able to hear what was about to be said. I stand before you not as a hero or a savior, but as your fellow brother in arms. I have embraced the label that society has placed upon me because I believe in our cause, flawed as it may seem to some. Our loyalty to the Dark Lord is unwavering, and with his second rising around the corner, I simply wanted to see how I could go about gaining a man who had a specialty that none of the other members had, said Midas, his words dripping with false promises of a better tomorrow. What are you talking about, Midas? Asked Peter. I don't want to have to shift through the gold nuggets that you always lay down with these fancy speeches. Midas let out a chuckle. Allow me to be direct then, I need the assistance of Mercury. Peter smirked as he let out a crackle of laughter that was more unhinged than anything that Midas had heard since the fall of the Dark Lord. You know about that? Asked Mercury as Peter stopped existing from the world. As I mentioned before, the Dark Lord's second act is about to be on the rise, and I know that you will be a most welcome party for his rise, said Midas. You also know that you will be most unwelcome on their side. Interesting. You extend me an opportunity to rejoin the Dark Lord's forces, yet you haven't told me the price that buying back in will cost me, retorted Mercury. Death would be a far kinder and safer option for me than to rejoin you guys in the poorest of favor. Living up to that rat form, taunted Midas. What if I told you that if you choose to rejoin us, you would not only return in favor, but be a favorite among even the inner circle? I would say that you are hiding something from me, but also know that you wouldn't tell me until I agree to do whatever it is that you have in mind for me to do, replied Mercury. Oh, I will openly tell you the task that I have in mind for you and would bring you the Dark Lord's favor if you were to do it correctly, said Midas. As you can see, I am not going anywhere, said Mercury with a wave of his arms inside his cell. I am all ears. The Dark Lord needs a ritual to return to his full power, said Midas. From our time in school, I remember how much a student of the finer arts of alchemy and rituals you are. If you were to complete this task, you would be seen as the man who single-handedly brought back the Dark Lord. Mercury blinked before he smiled. I will do it, Midas smirked. I never had a doubt that you would. A.N. Wow, that was a pretty long chapter, but I am overall happy with how it came about. I love writing for this story, expanding on things in ways that I feel never came about in the canon story. I really don't have much else to say, but this is going to be my main story for the foreseeable future. Expect 2-ish updates on this story per month, with 1 to 2 updates of some other stories during the course of the month. As always, think about joining my Discord. I have a May giveaway on the way. Would love to get as many people in on that as possible. Join with invite code PQQBWDSN. Until next time, High_Mars out. Chapter 8 A.N. Before we begin this chapter, I want to tell you this is not a bashing story. I know that it will seem like I am coming down hard on certain characters in this chapter. I know that my version of Harry is more fiery than his canon counterpart. Remember, Harry does not trust Dumbledore in this story. He is looking for anything that might be wrong. Now, onto the story. May 1977. James was lazing about in his floating hammock, gently rocking in the late spring breeze. a moment of peace and rest after the final exams. His left foot was hanging as he wore a charmed pair of glasses that blocked the sun from his vision. He was dozing off as he basked in the moment. Ames, gasped Peter as he ran over to James, drawing his attention. Wormtail, greeted James before he noticed how panicked he looked. What's going on? Snape and Sirius are having a fit, wheezed Peter. How is that any different than normal? Asked James. Snape is using those weird spells of his. He sliced several suits of armor in the alchemy hall into ribbons, squealed Peter. Fear wrapped itself around James's heart, causing a tight, uncomfortable feeling inside his chest, and he dropped down to the ground, the hammock dispelling as his magic's intention faded from it and his mind traveled elsewhere. A rumbling groan ripped through James's throat before he morphed into his prongs form, the prideful desire to rush to his herd's aid. Crashed through his system like a tsunami. Peter was attempting to say something, but the wind from James racing off covered the words up. The trek from the lake up to the main entrance hall door took less than 30 seconds. He hit the top step and morphed back into the 16-year-old human James Potter. Fucking Peter though, who the hell knew where the alchemy hall is? They hadn't used that part of the castle since Dumbledore was attending the school. Thankfully the map told James where it was and he sprints there as fast as he can. As he arrives, James Potter found himself in a precarious situation. Sirius Black and Severus Snape both looked like absolute shit. Sirius' robes were gone, his sweater missing the entire right sleeve and his tie was burnt. Snape's face has a large gash that went from his forehead to his right cheekbone that was leaking pus already, and his right eye was swollen shut. With a quick burst of courage, James stepped beating the two, his arms outstretched to keep them apart. "Stop," he shouted, his voice echoing in the dimly lit corridor. "This won't solve anything." Sirius, his wand still raised, glared at James. "Get out of the way, James. This is between Snivelus and me." Severus, looking equally furious, nodded in agreement. "Yes, Potter. This is none of your business." But James stood his ground. "It is my business if it involves my friends," he said firmly. "This isn't what Lily would want, Snape. If you continue fighting, you will be facing Sirius and myself." For a moment, there was a tense silence as Sirius and Severus exchanged glances, both seemingly considering their next move. Finally, Snape lowered his wand, a reluctant expression on his face. "Fine," he muttered. "But this isn't over, Black." Sirius, too, lowered his wand, though he continued to glare at Snape with more anger than James could remember him ever having towards the greasy-haired git. "Don't think you've won, Snivelus," he spat. Snape opened his mouth to say something before he saw James's hand on his wand already and instead turned on his heel and stalking away. James let out a sigh of relief, grateful that he had been able to prevent a potentially dangerous confrontation. He knew that the animosity between Sirius and Severus ran deep, but he hoped that his intervention had at least put a temporary halt to their feud. Right before Severus disappeared around the corner, he said, "You will both regret this moment." James turned to Sirius, who was still standing there, looking somewhat sheepish. "Thanks, James," Sirius said, his voice softer now. "I guess I owe you one." James grinned. "Don't mention it, mate," Sirius nodded as he dropped to the ground on his ass, causing both of them to laugh as James walked over to Sirius and dropped to the ground next to him. "What the hell started this fight in the first place?" asked James. "That fucking greasy-haired bastard stole some of my fucking hair and has been using it to polyjuice into me," snarled Sirius. "I thought he hated you. Why would he do that?" questioned James. "He's been using my gorgeous good looks to shag women that would never give him a second glance, let alone a shot at getting into their knickers," spat Sirius. James felt disgust bubble up inside his core. "He's a fucking loser." "Not gonna hear me argue with you on that part, mate," said Sirius. "If I had known that, Lily be damned, I would have hexed him as well," admitted James. "Yeah well, bastard is lucky that Lily has you so smitten, or he would be in the remembering their lives section of the Morning Post," laughed Sirius. James gave a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Snape had clearly crossed a major line and would need to be put in his place. December 1977. James stood at the edge of what used to be his home. The smoldering remains of the once cozy modest house were all that was left of his childhood. Sirius and Lily stood behind him, Sirius had tears falling freely from his eyes, crying just as hard as James was. "They're gone," he croaked, his voice filled with pain, and he felt Sirius' hand land on his shoulder before his cousin and best friend pulled him into a hug. "I'm going to check to see if anything survived the attack," muttered Lily as she used that as an excuse to give them a moment alone. James's great-grandmother was Sirius' great-aunt, because like most purebloods they were related in one form or another. For James, this was a moment where it felt like his entire world had been ripped apart from him, his parents having been killed in a Death Eaters attack right as the Yule season break began, a strike against the people who were resisting against them publicly and politically. For Sirius, this was almost equally as painful. He had run away from home when he was 13 before his 3rd year. The Potters had taken him in, raised him, clothed him, and had done what his mother had said was impossible, loved him. The loss of them was something that hit both of them in the same manner, an endless ocean of agony and pain. Misery crashing against the rocks that anchored them to the real world. Yet on the horizon of the endless dark abyss, there was a burning ball of anger and rage. A sun that burned due to nothing but fury. "Guys, over here," called out Lily, causing them to break the hug and look off to the right. Her voice had called out from them from the garden, the one that James's mom had spent countless hours tending to her, ushering away the house elf, taking pride in working on the garden herself. Lily was standing over what had been a once healthy tomato patch, but was now a burnt black patch of scorched earth. Lily didn't say anything else, she simply pointed down at the ground. There was a message that had been carved into the ground, one that froze the blood in James. "He told you that you would regret it." The message was simple, yet James could remember where he had last heard it. The throwaway phrase that the Slytherin prick had thrown over his shoulder. And this message carved into the garden had been a clear reference to that moment. "That son of a bitch," hissed Sirius as he managed to remember and put together what this message was a reference to. "I am going to kill him." Lily glanced at Sirius. "What do you mean? Do you know who did this?" "Your little fucking friend told James and I that we would regret crossing him this past May after the finals week. I guess we know what the Death Eaters offered him to get him to join," snarled Sirius. Lily gasped and James closed his eyes. He would catch Severus Snape sooner than later, but for now, he had to do what no one in Hogwarts ever wanted to do before graduating. He had to bury his mom and dad. Present day. June 1993. Harry scribbled a sloppy rushed set of runes on his scrap of parchment, before he channeled magic into it and it disappeared before transporting over to Hermione, who looked at him with a beaming smile before grabbing the parchment. "That was absolutely brilliant, Harry," exclaimed Hermione. "You really have a way with runes." "I try," replied Harry. He had been writing with Fleur all year, exchanging notes and tomes and research reports on the finer points of runes. There was a lot more studies on the subject outside of the island and on the continent from what Harry could tell. If he was being honest, he missed his French friend and he was hoping that Sirius and him would be able to remain in the alley so that he could be close to her once more. Was it due to a crush? Perhaps, but Harry liked hanging out with the intelligent older girl as well. His time spent studying with her over the summer had sparked something inside of him that had pushed him into a more academically inclined pathway. "Mr. Potter, the headmaster would like to speak with you in his office," said one of the prefects, the 6th-year male Hufflepuff. "The password is Wiggly Piggly." Harry rolled his eyes but hopped off the bench and left the great hall. He could always pop into the kitchen if he really wanted lunch. He made his way to the headmaster's office. He had been there more than a couple times at this point, so he knew where to go. He gave the gargoyle the password and it leapt to the side and Harry marched up the long spiral staircase. He was mentally preparing himself for this moment, the conversation where Dumbledore flexed his power as an adult, as a member of the local and national government, his power as part of the international government. He would certainly make some kind of demand from Harry, telling him that he needed to listen to him for reasons that he wasn't old enough to learn of yet. As he reached the door at the top of the staircase, he could hear the sound of muffled shouting. The wards on the headmaster's door were failing to keep the loud shouting from being heard from outside the door. Still did a good enough job that none of the words made any sense to Harry, so he did what he thought was best in the situation. He knocked on the door. The muffled noise on the other side of the door stopped almost at once, and after a brief moment of silence, Harry heard the headmaster say, "Ente," in a rather polite tone compared to the previous shouting that had been spilling out through the door. Harry opened the door and found a much healthier-looking Sirius standing before the headmaster's desk. Both of them were standing. Sirius was slightly red in the face, and Harry noticed that they both had their wands out. Clearly this had not been the friendliest conversation in the world based on the situation that Harry had walked into. He was not the best judge of a social interaction, but there was an awkward weight that hung in the air as he closed the door behind him. "Harry, my boy, take a seat," said Dumbledore as he gestured to the seat beside the one that Sirius was standing in front of. More than likely, before their shouting match, Sirius had been sitting in the chair in front of the headmaster like any student would have. Harry took the seat after a moment of hesitation. Sirius was quick to take a seat beside him, and Dumbledore let out a tired sigh. "Why did you call me here, Professor?" asked Harry when neither of the adults in the room said anything after a moment of silence. "Summer break is quickly approaching, and I wanted to discuss with you about where you should be staying," said Dumbledore. "Why does that matter?" asked Harry. "Sirius is my godfather. I should be staying with him. My parents trusted him to take care of me if anything happened to them." "I understand that, Harry, but you will find that," started Dumbledore. Sirius cut him off though. "Frankly, Professor, do you ask every other student where they plan to stay for summer break, or is it just Harry?" Dumbledore kissed his teeth at the question. "I am trying to do what is best for all parties." "And what exactly is that?" asked Sirius, his tone growing heated. "Giving Mr. Potter the protection that he needs," insisted Dumbledore. "I have been keeping him safe since he was young." "You've done a terrible job then, Professor," blurted out Harry, causing both set of eyes to drift to him. Harry felt his mouth dry up as he took a sharp intake of air. "Do you know what I thought my name was when I was little, Professor?" Dumbledore shook his head in the negative. "I thought my name was Freak," answered Harry, and the old headmaster flinched at the word as if he had been physically threatened. "I didn't know until I was in primary school that my name was not that word, but actually Harry James Potter. I was shoved in the cardboard under the stairs and fed little to nothing. I lived off of scraps that they didn't want, often shifting through the trash for anything edible to eat after my so-called family went off to bed. I didn't know what new clothes felt like until I came to Hogwarts. I didn't know what it was like to make a friend until I came to Hogwarts. I was physically bullied by my whale of a cousin, smacked around by my uncle, verbally berated for my raggedy appearance as if I had a choice in the matter by my aunt. All while I did all the cooking, all the cleaning. I tended to the garden in the blistering summer heat, shoved the snow in the chilly winters with not enough layers. Anyone else would have been given the shaft by the law, but nobody ever came to help me. Is this what you call keeping me safe, sir? Because you've done the worst possible job imaginable." Dumbledore had grown pale and paler with each word, and by the time Harry was finished, Dumbledore looked decades older than he really was. He looked defeated. He looked like a man who had suffered failure for the first time in recent memory. "Last year, I sat here and I begged you not to send me back to them. I begged you just like he did, and you told me that it didn't matter what I said, it didn't matter what they did to me," continued Harry as he recalled the moment he had lost all trust in the headmaster. "Is it true that you didn't let Tom stay here over the summers? He said you always told him no and forced him to return to the Muggle world?" questioned Harry. "He told you that?" mused Dumbledore with a soft twitch of his lips. He was quick to hide the frown that had threatened to appear on his face. "Harry, it would have been unfair to Tom not to return him every year." "Why?" asked Harry. This time Dumbledore could not hide the frown from his face, because it was for the greater good of everyone. "Tom came from the orphanage. He belonged there, even if they abused him?" asked Harry. Dumbledore winced. "There is more to the story, Harry. One day you will understand that I do everything for a reason. I sent Tom back because it was the best option available at the time." "Even if they abused him?" repeated Harry. "Again, my dear child, one day you will understand that certain things need to be done for the greater good," replied Dumbledore. Sirius's body shook with anger before he said in a low volume, "I've had enough of you sticking that extremely long nose in matters that don't concern you. Harry is my godson. He is coming to live with me, and that is final. I will allow the order to use number 12, but my apartment in the alley will be placed under the charm, and only Harry and I will be able to ever see it. I know that I have seemingly failed both of you in one way or another, but you both will understand in due time. Harry, you were placed with your relatives due to the blood bond you share with your aunt. I had used the blood relation between the two of you to cast a powerful ward that would protect you from all outside threats. explained Dumbledore. However, I had never once thought that the threats to you would come from inside. I might seem like a man who has their eye on everything, a man with their hand in every aspect of the world at large. But you will find that I am simply a man like everyone else. I have made a mistake in my life from time to time. You once asked me why I didn't allow Tom to remain in the wizarding world, Harry. The truth of the matter is that he harbored too much hate in his heart. His hatred of Muggles grew every single time he stepped into Hogwarts. I had hoped that by sending him back to the world that he grew up in, he would learn to love and appreciate it. I was wrong, as it turns out. The world has changed so much from when I was a young man. Sometimes I find that I don't know what to do anymore. Sirius, I will see you at the First Order meeting in 3 weeks. As for you, Harry, please forgive an old man for being stuck in his ways. Sirius nodded, and Harry felt a crashing wave of emptiness flood inside of his body. He had assumed that Dumbledore had been in charge of much more than he really was. Maybe he had judged the old headmaster much too harshly. Oh, and next year, Harry, the Triwizard Tournament will be coming to Hogwarts. I had requested an age line to be put up to protect the younger students, but the minister shot it down. With the shift in the winds coming, I want you to be as prepared as you can be for what I can only assume will be another plot on you. I do not know how, and I do not know when, but Tom surely has his eye on you since you brought about his original defeat, said Dumbledore as he pulled a tome from his desk and slid it across the desk. Harry grabbed it and read the title, A Master's Guide to Defensive Dueling by Albus Dumbledore. Sirius stood up and led Harry out of the office. He's going to fire Remus, somehow, muttered Sirius. How do you know that? Asked Harry. We didn't agree to his demands, meaning that one of us will get the shaft from the old man. My parents would do that to my brother and I. Punish one of us if they couldn't break the other. It's a classic manipulative tactic used by the old people. You have much to learn, Harry, explained Sirius. With the forewarned sense by Sirius, Harry was not overly shocked when in the next couple of days, it was leaked to the entire wizarding world that Remus Lupin, Defense Against the Dark Arts professor at Hogwarts, was in fact a werewolf. The calls of his head were loud and seemingly everyone was scared of him. Lupin's office door was open. He had already packed most of his things. The Grindylows' empty tank stood next to his battered old suitcase, which was open and nearly full. Lupin was bending over something on his desk and looked up only when Harry knocked on the door. I saw you coming, said Lupin, smiling. He pointed to the parchment he had been poring over. It was the Marauder's map. Sirius had said something like this would happen, said Harry, and he said you'd be fired because we didn't give in to what Dumbledore wanted. It's not true, is it? I'm afraid it is, said Lupin. He started opening his desk drawers and taking out the contents. Why? Said Harry. You're the best professor we've had in ages at this post, surely that must matter to someone. Remus sighed before he put on a brave face and gave Harry a sad smile. Severus. I think the thought of either of us being awarded that of the Order of Merlin was a knife to the gut to him. So, he accidentally let slip that I am a werewolf several days ago at breakfast. Snape? Questioned Harry. Oh, you were unaware? Muttered Remus. Severus Snape is a man who has one foot on both sides of the war, Harry. A man with two masters is loyal to neither, remember that. Harry nodded. Dumbledore always says he trusts him. Snape was a key part of the end of the war. He was the one who told Dumbledore that you know who was aware of the something important that caused your parents to go into hiding, said Remus, before he licked his lips. However, none of us are aware of how he even learned of that or why he told Dumbledore. So, he just turned sides right before the attack on my parents? Asked Harry. Remus shrugged. I'm sure there is more to it than that, but as far as I know, yeah, that's what happened. He changed topics rather quickly. Tell me about your Patronus. Oh, I've been practicing, said Harry before he drew his wand and thought about the fact that Sirius had been willing to duel Dumbledore for the right to keep him. Expecto Patronum, muttered Harry as a brilliant bright silvery large stag erupted out of the end of his wand and Remus got a faraway look in his eyes as he smiled. For a brief moment, Harry could see a tired teenager instead of the 30-year-old in front of him. Yes, your father was always a stag when he transformed, he said. That's why we called him Prongs. You mentioned not having any memory of your father. While Sirius or I could fill your head with stories, know that your inner guardian is your father. Harry smiled brightly, but that faded as Lupin threw his last few books into his case, closed the desk drawers, and turned to look at Harry. And, he hesitated, then held out the Marauder's map too. I am no longer your teacher, so I don't feel guilty about giving you back this as well. It's no use to me, and I daresay you, Ron, and Hermione will find uses for it. Harry took the map and grinned. You told me Moony, Padfoot, and Prongs would have wanted to lure me out of school. You said they'd have thought it was funny, said Harry, neglecting to mention their fourth member, something that Remus understood. And so, we would have, said Lupin, now reaching down to close his case. I have no hesitation in saying that James would have been highly disappointed if his son had never found any of the secret passages out of the castle. There was a knock on the door. Harry hastily stuffed the Marauder's map into his pocket, no reason to give anyone another reason to target him. It was Professor Dumbledore. He didn't look surprised to see Harry there. Your carriage is at the gates, Remus, he said. Thank you, Headmaster. Lupin picked up his old suitcase and the empty Grindylow tank. Well, goodbye, Harry, he said, smiling. It has been a real pleasure teaching you. I feel sure we'll meet again sometime, perhaps this summer with Sirius. Headmaster, there is no need to see me to the gates, I can manage. Harry had the impression that Lupin wanted to leave as quickly as possible. Goodbye, then, Remus, said Dumbledore soberly. Lupin shifted the Grindylow tank slightly so that he and Dumbledore could shake hands. Then, with a final nod to Harry and a swift smile, Lupin left the office. You know, Professor, what did Snape tell you that made you believe him? Asked Harry as suddenly it was just him and Dumbledore alone in the room. That is a personal matter, said Dumbledore. His tone was rather shy, as if he didn't want to talk about the topic. I think it was whatever made Voldemort target my parents, said Harry. After all, his very soul is stained with the magic of Tom Riddle. Dumbledore frowned. We all make mistakes in our youth, Harry. Is that what you call being a man in your 30s who openly leaks that a man is a werewolf? Asked Harry, feeling disgust bubble up inside of him. Something that I will have to have a word with Severus about, said Dumbledore. Do you know how good I've gotten with runes? Said Harry. They can do all sorts of things. I can use them to teleport things, but they also can be used to make things explode with ease if written correctly. Dumbledore's back stiffened and the elderly man towered over Harry. You would do well not to threaten my professors in my presence. You have given Snape too much of a leash, said Harry. I wonder what Sirius and Remus would say if I told them that he's the reason Voldemort targeted my parents. Dumbledore narrowed his eyes. Harry, you are testing my patience. Everyone is entitled to have their past, their secrets, their youthful mistakes. Is that what you said when you let them lock up Sirius and throw away the key? Challenged Harry. Is that why you had my parents' will sealed? To stop people from knowing that you let an innocent man rot in prison. Meanwhile, the man who is responsible for my parents' death gets to tell me that I'm a spoiled brat when I grew up in a bloody cupboard because of him. Harry's rage exploded and Dumbledore took a step back as the desk in the room exploded into a spray of splinters. Harry, you need to calm down, said Dumbledore as he put his hands up, trying to get the young man to come to reason. Why should I believe you? Snarled Harry as his nose started to slowly leak blood, his body shaking as his rage grew and Dumbledore's wand slipped into his hand. His eyes locked onto the form of Harry. The scene before him reminded him of something he hadn't seen in a long time. Why are you so angry, Harry? Asked Dumbledore. You have ruined my life. You let that man berate me every day, replied Harry as more blood leaked from his nose as his magic rebelled against his body, his anger causing wave after wave of magic to flee his body. Forgive me, Harry, said Dumbledore before he jabbed his wand at Harry, causing the young boy to freeze, trapped by the magic that blanketed his body. Harry's eyes were filled with so much rage and the blood was starting to leak from his eyes and ears as well. Dumbledore could feel it, the darkness inside of the magic that was begging to be unleashed, whether by harming someone or harming Harry himself. I really am so sorry that you found out that Snape delivered the information about the prophecy to Voldemort that put the target on their back. But you are not well, my boy, and I will do what is needed to make sure that you and every other is safe. Everyone is going to say that this is wrong, that this is too drastic of a reaction to this outburst, but I cannot allow this to fester, said Dumbledore. Dumbledore made eye contact with Harry before he muttered, Legilimens. Harry's mind, as stubborn as the young man was, did not have any mental walls or barriers to stop Dumbledore from ripping directly into his mind. He couldn't change anything drastic in the boy. It would be noticed especially with Sirius and Remus most likely going to be spending the entire summer with Harry. The bright side is that Dumbledore wasn't trying to change the young man. He was simply drawing up all memories of Snape that made Harry hold such a strong dislike for the man. As Dumbledore shifted through the memories, he was taken back by the sickening disgust that Harry felt merely from being in the man's presence. The manner in which Snape berated the young boy, the lack of actually teaching potions, the way that he targeted Harry and his friends is all seen through Harry's point of view. Frankly, it made Dumbledore sick to his stomach to experience things the way that Harry had as well. Harry James Potter was not some Tom Riddle Jr. clone. He was a rather good-spirited young man. Thus, Dumbledore was going to take away these memories that were tainting his mental state and magic. And in return, Dumbledore would leave some memories of a couple complex rune arrays and some advanced transfiguration theory behind in the young man's mind. Obliviate, he levitated Harry to the hospital wing and had a letter sent to Sirius, having the man return to the castle for the second time in less than a month. "So, what exactly happened?" asked Sirius. "This is something that you might have never heard of, but I believe that an ancestor of yours assisted me in dealing with this once upon a time. This hasn't been seen in a long time, almost unthought of in our current times," said Dumbledore as he decided to go with a version of the truth. "But before wizards went underground, when we were still being hunted by muggles, young wizards and witches sometimes tried to suppress their magic to avoid persecution. So instead of learning to harness or to control their powers, they developed what was called an obscurus." "I've never heard of it," admitted Sirius. "What exactly is it?" Sirius was not overly fond of his former headmaster, but even he knew that the old man had forgotten more things than most of the population would ever learn. An obscurial was a young wizard or witch who had developed a dark parasitical magical force, known as an obscurus, as a result of their magic being suppressed through psychological or physical abuse, said Dumbledore, "perhaps with the loss of Remus from the school combined with a home life that is much worse than I had previously thought. Harry's rage and misery had caused his magic to revolt against his body." "And you think he should go back to the Muggles who clearly hate him?" questioned Sirius. "No, he is to remain in your care," dismissed Dumbledore. "I had thought that Harry needed the protection that the Blood Wards offered, but he's clearly better off removed from that place, and I can assure you, he is never to return to that house." Sirius' anger deflated. "Is there a way to fix him? To fix this? Based on my past encounters with victims of this situation, you can resolve this type of condition with love and compassion. Hate and anger cause it. The opposite will be the cure of it," said Dumbledore, "which is why I leave it in your hands. You can show him the love and care that none of us would be able to. Pick him up where I have dropped the ball, so to say." Sirius nodded. Little whinging. Privet Drive. The trio of the inner circle popped into the street in the cover of darkness. The quiet little Muggle neighborhood was something different from what they were used to. Midas looked at the perfectly square houses, each one the same two-story home. "It's as if each home is a poorly cast duplicate charm of the last one," said Midas with a drawl that was filled with boredom and thinly covered disgust. "It doesn't matter what the houses look like, it matters only that we get what we came to get," cut in Orion, his large axe hanging from his back. "This place hasn't changed all that much," commented Mercury. "Cute," muttered Midas. "We didn't bring you here because you had fond memories. Which one of these places belongs to the Muggle relatives of Potter?" "They live in number 4 inches," answered Mercury as he pointed his hand at the correct house, the lack of an index finger not surprising anyone there. Orion nodded as he extended his magical sensory and nodded as if it was obvious that this house was the correct one. The faded magic that arched over the house was more powerful than anything he had felt since the fall of his master. He licked his lips as he honed in on the nature of the wards. They were not the kind that the Ministry would put up for a young man like Potter. "Orion, do you feel that?" asked Midas. "No, what do you feel?" asked Orion. "Those are powerful blood wards over this home, most likely tied to Potter and his aunt through his mother's side," replied Midas. "Never took you for the type to be big on ward Midas," commented Orion as they could feel the ripple of the former wards trying to softly push them away, but he poured his magic into the faded wards, slowly unraveling them. "My wife's family was particularly skilled in blood wards. It's how they kept people who were not of black blood out of their libraries. kept people from stealing things from their house as well, admitted Midas as Orion finished shattered the pathetic remains of what was probably once powerful wards. To think the biggest opponent to the Dark Lord grew up in such a quaint little place like this, makes you wonder, said Orion. Makes you think what? Questioned Midas. The Dark Lord also grew up outside the wizarding world. There seems to be some level of desire to be magically great if you happen to be from a pureblood family yet raised outside of the influence of that family, replied Orion. You can think that if you want to, but blood purity is a sign of power and I will not hear anything else on the matter, teased Midas. Orion shrugged as they finally started to walk towards number 4. All three of them, despite their different shapes, fell in line with one another. Midas drew his wand and he cast a small muggle repellent ward around the home as they approached it. It would do them not all that well if they happened to draw the attention of any of these other filthy creatures out here that were wondering about. Mercury morphed into his rat form and he slipped through a small gap near the window above the garden. Less than a minute later, he was back in his human form, unlocking the door and letting them in. Sometimes, the sneaky yet simple method was the best way to get into a location. They all looked around the home, finding various photos lining the walls. Yet, despite the seemingly surplus amount of still images that they saw, none of them could spot an image of the young Potter boy. No, all they saw was those disgustingly obese Muggle men and that skinny Muggle woman with the weirdly long neck. There was no sign of a fourth member living here at all if you went by the photos. But Orion was one of the best magical censors that lived in England. He sniffed the air as if he was a bloodhound before making his way over to the cupboard under the stairs. He frowned as he arrived at that spot. That was not quite the spot he was expecting to sense a large residue of magical energy. Yet that area was saturated with magic, as if someone of magical nature had lived in the area for a long time. But that made no sense. Surely they wouldn't stick the Potter boy under the stairs. You okay? Asked Mercury as he noticed Orion staring at the cupboard door for a seemingly ever-growing amount of time, a moment too long in his opinion. Potter is the only wizard to live here? Asked Orion. The Ministry's record tell us that he is the only magical being for almost 500 meters, answered Midas. Then these fucking muggles really did it. They did the impossible, muttered Orion. There is a thick stain of magical energy coming from this cupboard door. I can only imagine how much stronger it's going to grow when we open the door. Midas frowned. Is that important? Think of how much you hold your cane, Midas, said Orion. Midas nodded. His cane was part of his everyday life at this point. It was something that he took with him everywhere. The magical energy that you've stained the cane with is almost the same as the magical energy that stains this door. The muggles who live here, they must have kept Harry fucking Potter stuck in the cupboard under the stairs, continued Orion. Midas hissed. Muggles mistreating a young wizard who couldn't defend themselves. It was the stuff of nightmares that all witches and wizards were told growing up. Stories about the witch trials, the burning of young magical children upon the public displays of accidental magic. None of the men here particularly cared about Harry Potter all that much, but thought of any magical child suffering to the hands of muggles didn't sit right with them. Open the door, ordered Midas. Orion ripped the door open, breaking the small metal bolt that was used to keep it sealed shut. He immediately covered his nose as the scent of magic washed over him. It was a thick, strong odor, the sign of a powerful wizard. And yet, it was coming from a tiny cot that wouldn't be fit for a house elf, let alone a wizarding child. Is that blood? Asked Mercury as he pointed at a brown faded stain on the back wall of the cupboard, a small brown toddler hand-sized stain. Orion sniffed and snarled as he confirmed that it was blood. Midas gripped his cane much tighter and he looked at the pattern of small faded brown stains that lined the back wall. It was the pattern of a tiny human handprint. Either that or a house elf, but given their current location, it was quite clear to Midas which of the two it was. These savages, muttered Midas, and Orion found himself nodding in agreement without thinking. These muggles had no idea who they had been mistreating. Midas waved his wand and his revealing charm told him that there was a trio of people upstairs. All three of them were fast asleep, it seemed too. They're upstairs. Orion, go wake them up, ordered Midas as he and Mercury banished all of the furniture to the corners of the room, creating a large area for which the rather fat family would be able to huddle up. The stairs whined as Orion forced the three muggles down the stairs at wand point. He shoved the son forward into the cleared-out living room area and both of the parents raced after him, doting over him in a caring fashion. "Just who do you think you?" asked the elder fat man, his tiny eyes narrowing in anger as they bounced from Orion to Midas to Mercury. The woman gasped when her eyes fell on Mercury. "You're alive?" Her shocked question drew a soft smile from Mercury, as if he was greeting an old friend. And in a way he was, because even if he was no longer Peter, he still wore his face. "Petunia, you've really slimmed down," greeted Mercury. "You were such a chubby little girl and teenager. Quite shocking that you let your own son put on so much weight when you worked so hard to get rid of your own weight." "My son is perfect," spat Petunia as she hugged her large obese son. "I guess beauty really is in the eye of the beholder," said Orion. "Then maybe she's blind," joked Midas, drawing a laugh from both of his fellow Death Eaters and a glare from the parents before them. "What do you people want?" asked the elder male once more, his face turning a nasty shade of purple as his anger built up at being ignored. "Vernon, please," pleaded the woman. "They have wands, clearly they're from that lot." Midas blinked at the manner in which she had finished that sentence. Lot was not something that he had ever heard used to reference the Death Eaters before. It was a very unique experience for him, probably one that Mercury and Orion shared as well. Vernon growled, "What are you freaks doing here? I haven't seen that boy since I dropped him off in London last summer." Midas felt his chest filled with a bubbling, burning sensation at those words. Who were these pathetic muggles to address him or any wizard by such a word? That was a word that should be reserved from their kind. They were the ones without magic. They were the ones who were the lower creatures, missing something, anything that made them special. "Watch your tongue, you filthy muggle," snarled Midas as he brandished his wand, and he turned to Orion. "Let's have some fun." Orion was unsure of what Midas meant when he said that, but when Midas pointed his wand at the young male and said, "Imperio," he felt like maybe he was starting to understand a bit. Midas had underpowered the spell, putting just enough magic to get the spell to work but not enough to ruthlessly overpower the young muggle male's mind. With any magic in his body, the young man was powerless to stop the spell from putting him under the control of Midas, yet due to the spell being underpowered, Dudley was still mentally aware of what he was doing. The young man ripped himself free of this parent's grasp and cried out, "Dad, Mom, I can't control my body." "Orion, hand him the axe on your back," said Midas with glee. Orion handed over the large axe he used to kill magical creatures to the young boy, who was sobbing loudly as he grabbed the axe with both hands. "Please, you don't have to do this," pleaded Petunia. "We aren't doing anything," chuckled Midas before he mentally commanded the boy to attack his father, and the boy lunged forward immediately. The axe sliced into the fat man's arm, cutting through the bone with ease before sliding into the floor as the boy couldn't keep balance with the weight of the large axe. "Ugh!" screamed Vernon as his arm dropped to the ground, blood squirting from the wound, and Petunia started screaming at the top of her lungs. "Scream all you want," taunted Mercury, "nobody can hear you." Dudley picked up the axe, ripping up the carpet as he did so, before swinging it with all his might at his father's stomach. The blade was sharp enough to cut through anything, yet Vernon was so thick that Dudley didn't have the strength to push the blade through his father. Petunia was sobbing on the ground in bawl as Vernon collapsed forward, and the blade of the axe that was embedded into his stomach was pushed all the way through by the force of him landing on the blade, cutting him in half. Dudley was crying, his nose running, before he marched over to the kitchen and grabbed the biggest and sharpest knife he could find in the kitchen and promptly put the blade in his mouth. The blade cut into the right side of his mouth, and with the handle sticking out, he slammed his head down and pushed the knives through the back of his own throat. Petunia's bawling was renewed, and Midas walked over to her to stand over her. "Please, don't cry, I haven't even begun to torture you yet." "Why?" stammered Petunia. "Because a disgusting creature such as yourself should have never wronged a magical child," answered Midas. "We don't even like Harry Potter, but you think that you're better than him? You're a mistake that shouldn't be allowed to walk this earth, all muggles are." Orion summoned his axe back to his hand with the runes inscribed on the handle. "I think I will send Potter his uncle's head." Petunia yelped at those words, and Midas nodded in agreement. "Now, let's get you out of here, you and your blood can't be risked in the fire." Midas's wand pointed at Petunia before ropes shot out and encircled her body as she started to float in the air. Orion sliced off Vernon's head and put it in a wooden box that he conjured. "Mercury, dispose of the shit stain of a house, please," said Midas as he walked out of the house, Petunia's body floating behind him. Orion followed him before they placed one hand on either side of Petunia's floating body. The last sight before they popped away was the start of a massive fire that consumed the house. Wow, would you look at that? 7,700 plus words minus the ends. I hope you guys liked this chapter. Again, not trying to bash any of the characters. Some of the characters are not good people, such as Midas, Snape, and even Harry. They are all doing things to try and get the best results for themselves. Dumbledore is a good person in this story. He is just making mistakes. He had a need for Snape that will be revealed at some point down the line. Fleur will be back in the story starting this chapter, as we will cover the summer break and the return to Hogwarts hopefully in the next chapter. It might be one long summer chapter and then a chapter for the return to Hogwarts until the end of the first task.